The Nordic Sea stretched endlessly into the horizon, their dark waters reflecting the pale glow of a winter moon. Waves rolled gently against the rugged coastline, whispering secrets that only the winds and the gulls seemed to understand. There, in the solitude of the fjords, a lone figure moved with an almost predatory grace, navigating the narrow inlets and hidden coves that most sailors avoided. His name was Ronnie, though the locals would soon come to know him as the Viking, a title earned not through lineage but through daring, cunning, and a relentless mastery of the seas. From a distance, he might have seemed like any other fisherman, bundled against the cold, guiding his small vessel with quiet confidence. But beneath the calm exterior, a mind both sharp and calculating plotted ventures far beyond ordinary commerce. The first tales of Ronnie's exploits began not in the bustling cities, nor in the grand halls of power, but in the quiet, frozen villages tucked away along Norway's northern coastline. Life there was harsh and unforgiving, winters could last for months, leaving the fjords shrouded in mist and ice. Yet it was precisely this isolation, this daily confrontation with the raw forces of nature, that shaped a young boy into someone who would one day challenge both men and the law. As the winds howled through the narrow valleys, he learned to read the moods of the sea, to anticipate shifts in weather, and to navigate routes that would be invisible to those less familiar with the rhythms of the water. In these early lessons, he discovered not just survival, but control, a subtle command over a world that demanded respect and cunning in equal measure. Even as a boy, Ronnie had an innate restlessness. He was drawn to the horizon, to the unseen places that called from beyond the fjords. While other children remained within the safety of their villages, he would sneak aboard small fishing boats, feeling the spray of salt water against his face, learning the secrets of ropes, sails, and rudders. Each journey into the open waters was a lesson in both freedom and danger. The cold bit at his skin, and the sea could turn violent without warning, yet he felt alive in those moments, exhilarated by the unpredictable power surrounding him. Those early voyages instilled a profound understanding: to master the seas was to respect them, to anticipate them, and, when necessary, to bend them to one's own will. But mastery of the sea was only one part of Ronnie's growing awareness of the world. He observed the movement of goods along the coastline, the quiet exchanges in secluded coves, and the subtle ways merchants and sailors conducted business far from the watchful eyes of authorities. It fascinated him how much could be accomplished in silence, how easily things could slip unnoticed between the fingers of those who assumed control over the land. This was the first spark of understanding that rules could be navigated, stretched, and, in certain circumstances, broken, not recklessly, but strategically. In the hush of the midnight fjords, as moonlight glinted off dark waters, he began to see patterns, routes, and opportunities where others saw only danger and emptiness. By the time he reached adolescence, Ronnie had become a figure of quiet legend in his own neighborhood. People spoke in hushed tones of the boy who could navigate fog and storm with uncanny precision, who could appear in one village at night and vanish by dawn. He was admired for his skill, and envied for the freedom he seemed to command. And yet, for all the awe he inspired, there was an undercurrent of caution. Those who knew him well sensed that his ambitions reached far beyond simple survival or local fame. The curiosity in his eyes suggested plans that had not yet been spoken aloud, dreams that extended across waters and borders, waiting for the right moment to unfold. It was during these early years that the dual nature of his life began to take shape, outwardly calm and unassuming, inwardly restless and calculating. He learned patience, the art of timing, and the quiet strength of observation. Small decisions mattered enormously: a choice of route, the moment to set sail, the way a conversation was steered. All these small acts were lessons in strategy that would later define him as much as his daring exploits on the water. Even in play, whether racing small boats against friends or exploring hidden caves along the shoreline, he was learning the unspoken rules of advantage, stealth, and timing. The sea became both teacher and companion, offering a rhythm to which his mind and body attuned themselves. Storms that would terrify others merely demanded his respect and careful reading. Calm waters offered opportunity. Shadows and fog provided cover. Each element of the Nordic environment contributed to a growing understanding of navigation, timing, and discretion, skills that would become invaluable in the years to come. His early life, isolated yet full of natural challenges, shaped a unique perspective. The world was vast, opportunities were abundant, and success favored those willing to venture beyond the safe and predictable. Evenings were spent by the firesides of his home village, where the warmth contrasted sharply with the cold that seemed to penetrate every corner of the fjords. Families gathered, stories were told, and the mundane rhythms of life continued. But Ronnie's mind was often elsewhere, tracing unseen paths, imagining the unseen world beyond the horizon. He listened closely to tales of seafarers, smugglers, and traders who had moved goods under the noses of authorities, weaving these stories into his own understanding of possibility. The combination of natural skill, learned observation, and quiet ambition created in him a rare alchemy of talent, the ability to act decisively when necessary, and to remain invisible when discretion was the wiser choice. And so, under the calm but watchful gaze of the moon and stars, Ronnie, the Viking, began a journey that would carry him far beyond the fjords of his youth. He would navigate not only waters and weather, but human ambition, law, and loyalty, using lessons learned in solitude and danger to carve a path that few could follow. The icy seas would test him, the winds would challenge him, but they would also train him, shape him, and prepare him for the extraordinary life that awaited. From the quiet fjords to the hidden coves and shadowed harbors of northern Europe, his story was only beginning, and the whispers of the Vikings' legend had already begun to stir in the minds of those who would one day both admire and fear him. Ronnie's early years unfolded against the stark, majestic backdrop of the Nordic fjords, where winter's chill lingered for months and summers were brief, almost fleeting. The small village where he was born seemed almost suspended in time, a place where the rhythm of life followed the ebb and flow of the tides and the moods of the sea. Wooden houses, weathered by storms and frost, lined the narrow pathways, and the smoke of hearth fires curled into the sky, marking the homes of families bound by tradition and quiet resilience. For a child like Ronnie, every element of this world was a teacher: the biting wind, the rhythm of waves, the sharp scent of pine and salt carried on the breeze. In this isolation, far from the bustle of cities, he learned to observe, to listen, and to move through the world with careful attention. His family was modest, hard-working, and deeply rooted in the traditions of the region. His father was a fisherman, a man who understood the sea's temperamental moods, who rose before dawn to cast nets into icy waters, and whose hands were calloused with years of labor. His mother managed the home, maintaining warmth and stability despite the long winters and the scarcity of resources. Ronnie was the youngest of 3 children, a boy whose energy and curiosity often set him apart from his siblings. The small home he grew up in was filled with the quiet hum of daily life, but even within these walls, he displayed an uncanny awareness of the world around him. He noticed the patterns of the tides, the way birds flew before a storm, and the subtle shifts in temperature that foretold the coming weather. These observations, seemingly small, would later translate into a profound mastery of navigation and timing, skills crucial to his later endeavors. From an early age, Ronnie was restless. He was drawn to the open horizon, where sky and water met in endless gray, imagining what lay beyond the fjords that hemmed him in. While other children played in the village square or helped with chores, he spent hours near the docks, watching boats rock gently in the water, studying the sails, and listening to the murmurs of fishermen trading tales of the sea. He learned to handle small vessels, first under supervision, then alone, developing a sense of rhythm and balance that seemed innate. The quiet solitude of these excursions was both a playground and a classroom, teaching him patience, awareness, and the courage to face the unpredictable forces of nature. Education in the village was simple but meaningful. Ronnie attended a small schoolhouse, where the lessons were practical and straightforward, often interrupted by the changing seasons or the demands of family labor. He was not the most diligent student in traditional subjects, but he possessed a sharp mind, particularly when it came to observation, strategy, and problem-solving. He delighted in puzzles and challenges that required thinking several steps ahead, and he often applied this strategic mindset to his daily life: how to secure firewood before a storm, how to traverse icy paths safely, or how to maneuver a boat in tight channels without drawing attention. These skills, learned in the mundane fabric of childhood, would later prove indispensable in the high-stakes world of smuggling. Friendship and rivalry also shaped his early life. In the close-knit village, relationships were intense and formative. Ronnie's daring nature often led him into small conflicts with other children, but also earned him admiration for his courage and ingenuity. He learned early on the value of alliances, trust, and negotiation, observing how small acts of loyalty, or betrayal, could shift the balance of influence even in a tiny community. These lessons, subtle as they were, mirrored the dynamics he would encounter later on a much larger scale, where loyalty and cunning determined not just survival, but supremacy. The physical environment of his youth also left an indelible mark. The fjords were dramatic and demanding, cliffs rose abruptly from the water, forests grew thick and dark, and hidden inlets offered both refuge and danger. In summer, the sun barely dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden streaks across the waves, while winter brought near constant darkness, forcing villagers to navigate by memory and intuition. Ronnie learned to read shadows, to anticipate shifts in the weather, and to use the terrain to his advantage. This intimate knowledge of geography would later enable him to plan routes, evade pursuers, and manipulate both land and sea in his operations. Evenings were a time of quiet reflection and imagination. Ronnie would sit by the hearth, listening to the stories of fishermen who spoke of distant lands, perilous journeys, and hidden treasures carried across borders. These tales sparked his imagination and broadened his understanding of the world, showing him that life was larger than the boundaries of his village. He absorbed these narratives not as mere fantasy, but as lessons in possibility, learning to discern strategy from bravado and opportunity from risk. The combination of observation, imagination, and innate daring created a young mind capable of envisioning paths that others could not see. Yet it was not all isolation and study. Ronnie experienced moments of play and mischief, learning the practicalities of negotiation, timing, and stealth through games and small exploits with friends. Whether racing along frozen rivers, exploring hidden caves, or sneaking aboard boats, he tested limits, learned consequences, and honed instincts that would later serve him in far more dangerous arenas. These seemingly small adventures were rehearsals for the high-stakes maneuvers of adulthood, teaching him confidence, courage, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Through it all, a quiet ambition began to grow. Ronnie understood early that life offered no guarantees, that survival required ingenuity, and that extraordinary outcomes demanded extraordinary effort. He was drawn to challenges, to the allure of the unknown, and to the subtle power that could be wielded by those who saw opportunity where others saw only risk. The lessons of childhood, the harshness of nature, the rhythms of village life, the delicate balance of trust and rivalry, combined to shape a young man who was not only capable of navigating the seas but capable of navigating the complex, often dangerous currents of human behavior. By the time he reached adolescence, the foundations of Ronnie, the Viking, had been laid. His body was strong, his mind sharp, and his instincts honed by years of observing, testing, and learning. The fjords had taught him patience, the village had taught him strategy, and the stories of distant lands had taught him ambition. Each day, as he walked along the docks or gazed at the horizon, he absorbed lessons quietly, storing them for the future. The combination of environment, family, community, and personal daring formed the bedrock of a life that would soon move beyond the tranquil fjords into a world of intrigue, risk, and extraordinary adventure. And so, the boy who grew up among the fjords, in a village shaped by nature and tradition, began the first chapter of a story that would carry him far beyond his modest beginnings, a story of ambition, mastery, and the restless call of the sea that would one day define him as Ronnie, the Viking. As Ronnie moved into his teenage years, the call of the open sea grew stronger, an irresistible force that seemed to pulse through his very veins. The fjords, once a familiar playground, now felt like a starting line rather than a limit. Every sunrise over the icy waters was an invitation, a reminder that beyond the cliffs and inlets lay a world filled with possibilities, challenges, and risks he had yet to fully encounter. He began spending longer hours aboard small fishing vessels, often venturing further than anyone else dared. Each trip was a lesson in patience, navigation, and endurance, teaching him to read the subtle signs of weather, current, and tide. The sea was alive, unpredictable, and yet it spoke a language that he increasingly understood, a dialogue of movement, pressure, and timing that would later define his mastery of smuggling routes. Ronnie's teenage adventures were not confined to skillful sailing alone. He became increasingly aware of the small networks of trade and barter that existed along the coastline. Goods moved quietly between villages, fishermen exchanged extra catches for necessities, and occasionally, small contraband shipments passed unnoticed through coves and hidden channels. He watched these movements with fascination, noting the patterns, timing, and vulnerabilities that others overlooked. Unlike other boys who saw only the risk of disapproval or punishment, Ronnie perceived opportunity, learning how careful observation and precise timing could turn ordinary transactions into calculated advantage. The seeds of his later ingenuity in smuggling were planted in these quiet, almost imperceptible moments. He also began forming his first significant friendships and rivalries, relationships that would both shape and test him. Among his peers, Ronnie was admired for his daring nature, his skill at maneuvering boats through narrow passages, and his uncanny sense of timing. But his confidence sometimes provoked envy and challenge. Skirmishes over who could navigate the fastest route or who could handle the trickiest maneuver became common, each encounter a subtle lesson in strategy, psychology, and negotiation. He learned to assert himself without unnecessary aggression, to read intentions, and to anticipate the reactions of others. These interpersonal dynamics, though seemingly trivial, mirrored the more complex negotiations and alliances he would later encounter in the criminal underworld. His ventures into minor mischief were equally formative. Ronnie experimented with small, harmless acts of rule-bending, testing the boundaries of authority and the limits of secrecy. He might sneak extra supplies onto a boat, trade goods without permission, or explore forbidden coves to see who might be watching. These actions were never reckless, they were calculated, exploratory exercises in risk, concealment, and discretion. Each success reinforced his confidence, while each near miss instilled humility and caution. It was during these formative years that he developed an intuitive sense of when to act boldly and when to wait, a balance that would later allow him to navigate both the seas and the intricate networks of law, loyalty, and deception. The sea itself became a teacher of both courage and patience. Storms that forced other sailors back to shore were opportunities for Ronnie to test his skills, learning to read wind patterns, wave behavior, and the subtle shifts that signal danger. He became adept at staying calm in tense situations, an ability that allowed him to anticipate and react rather than panic. These formative experiences fostered a quiet resilience, a mental fortitude that would later define his approach to high-stakes smuggling operations. The sea demanded respect, and in return, it offered lessons in timing, strategy, and adaptability, skills he absorbed almost instinctively. By now, Ronnie was increasingly aware of the thrill of secrecy and the excitement of operating under the radar. He learned how to move undetected, using the natural landscape, cliffs, fog, and hidden inlets, to his advantage. Quiet nights became his laboratories, where he tested new routes, studied patrol patterns, and experimented with techniques for moving goods discreetly. The adrenaline of these covert excursions was exhilarating, yet he maintained a calm exterior, learning early the importance of composure in the face of potential danger. Each successful venture bolstered both his confidence and his reputation among those who quietly observed his skills. Family life continued to influence him, providing both grounding and contrast. His parents, while unaware of the subtle lessons he was absorbing about risk and opportunity, instilled values of diligence, observation, and respect for skill. His father's patient mastery of the sea and his mother's careful management of home and resources offered models of quiet authority and competence. Yet, for all their guidance, Ronnie's ambition stretched beyond the familiar. He absorbed their lessons but imagined ways to extend them, applying their principles to a broader, more daring canvas. It was a delicate balance between respect for tradition and the hunger for personal achievement, and he navigated it with a natural blend of reverence and curiosity. The friendships he formed also became experiments in loyalty and trust. Teenage alliances were fragile, often tested by competition, envy, or opportunity. Ronnie learned to negotiate, to anticipate deception, and to discern genuine support from self-interest. He observed how influence and respect were earned through skill, reliability, and occasional boldness, lessons that would later translate seamlessly into managing crews, allies, and rivals in his smuggling operations. Each relationship was a microcosm of power dynamics, a rehearsal for the complex social calculations of adult life in both lawful and illicit spheres. Imagination played a significant role as well. Even as he honed practical skills, Ronnie spent hours envisioning voyages beyond the fjords, contemplating routes across distant waters, and imagining encounters with far-off ports and hidden harbors. The quiet nights, illuminated by moonlight on icy waters, fostered both creativity and strategy. He learned to anticipate scenarios, weigh outcomes, and mentally rehearse decisions long before they became real-world challenges. These exercises in foresight would prove invaluable when he later faced choices of considerable risk and consequence. By the time he neared adulthood, Ronnie's teenage years had been a crucible of skill, observation, and ambition. The quiet adventures, minor rule-bending, and hours spent navigating treacherous waters had forged a unique combination of confidence, ingenuity, and resilience. He had learned to read people as skillfully as he read tides, to anticipate challenges before they arose, and to balance courage with caution. In the quiet, moonlit fjords, he had begun to craft a mindset that was both strategic and daring, preparing him for the larger, more audacious ventures that awaited on the seas beyond the familiar inlets of his youth. And so, the restless boy who had once raced small boats along frozen rivers and explored hidden coves was becoming a young man with a growing mastery of the waters, a keen understanding of human nature, and an insatiable curiosity for the world beyond the fjords. Every journey, every observation, every small act of daring contributed to the formation of a figure who would one day be known not merely as a sailor or smuggler, but as Ronnie, the Viking, a name whispered along northern coasts with equal parts admiration and trepidation. The stage was set, and the sea, vast and merciless, awaited his command. As Ronnie transitioned from adolescence into young adulthood, his fascination with the sea began to intertwine with a growing awareness of opportunity beyond mere survival. The fjords had taught him patience and precision, but now he started to see the possibilities in the movements of goods, the patterns of trade, and the small openings where rules could be bent without immediate consequence. What had once been playful exploration gradually transformed into calculated ventures. His early encounters with minor exchanges, fish traded for essentials, extra supplies quietly moved under the cover of night, offered him a glimpse into the mechanics of commerce and discretion. These experiences, innocuous in isolation, were the first steps toward a life that would soon skirt the boundaries of law, blending audacity with subtlety. Ronnie's first forays into crime were modest in scale but formative in impact. He began working with a small network of locals, men who recognized both his skill at navigating the treacherous coastal waters and his natural charisma. Under their guidance, he moved goods that were frowned upon but not strictly illegal, extra barrels of spirits, contraband tobacco, and occasional luxury items that needed discreet transport from village to village. Each mission required careful planning, selecting routes that avoided patrols, timing departures with the tides, and ensuring that silence and secrecy were maintained. Even in these early operations, he exhibited an instinct for leadership, subtly coordinating movements and advising older, more experienced smugglers on timing and tactics. The thrill of moving unseen through the fjords was intoxicating. Nights were his domain, when fog rolled in like a protective veil and moonlight shimmered across the dark waters. Boats glided silently through narrow inlets, barely disturbing the calm waves. Ronnie's keen observation of the environment, winds shifting slightly, the faint smell of salt carried by the air, subtle changes in water currents, allowed him to anticipate dangers before they became immediate threats. Each successful venture reinforced not only his confidence but also his understanding of the delicate balance between audacity and caution. The young smuggler learned quickly that a single misstep could mean capture or ruin, and that patience, planning, and observation were just as vital as courage. Interactions with others in these small networks taught him lessons in loyalty, deception, and negotiation. Some partners were reliable, bound by mutual benefit, while others were opportunistic, prone to betrayal if the stakes grew high. Ronnie observed human behavior with quiet scrutiny, learning to identify subtle cues of trustworthiness and duplicity. He developed a measured approach to alliances, knowing when to assert authority and when to allow others the illusion of control. These interpersonal skills, honed in the intimate but high-stakes world of small smuggling operations, would later serve him in dealings with larger, more dangerous networks across the Nordic countries and beyond. Even the mundane logistics of early smuggling operations offered critical lessons. Ronnie learned to manage supplies, conceal contraband, and maintain equipment in top condition. Each boat became a mobile classroom, where navigation, timing, and technical skill converged. He discovered that success required attention to the smallest details, the precise distribution of cargo to maintain balance, the soundless movement of barrels across decks, and the subtle adjustments to sails and rudders to minimize noise and wake. In these careful preparations, he honed not only technical skill but also discipline, patience, and foresight, the very qualities that would define his later career. There were also moments of near disaster, events that tested his composure and sharpened his instincts. A sudden storm could roll in from the north, turning calm waters into a roiling battlefield of waves. Rival smugglers might attempt interception, or a village lookout could unexpectedly spot a vessel in transit. In these moments, Ronnie's cool temperament and quick thinking became crucial. He learned to respond calmly under pressure, to make split-second decisions that balanced risk and reward, and to adapt strategies on the fly. Each narrow escape reinforced a growing reputation for reliability, skill, and daring, building the foundation for the legend that would follow him through the Nordic coasts. Through these early ventures, Ronnie also began cultivating a personal code, a subtle understanding of limits and ethics within the world he was entering. While he was willing to bend rules and exploit opportunities, he recognized that discretion and calculated risk were more effective than recklessness. The quiet discipline he displayed, careful planning, measured action, and avoidance of unnecessary attention, set him apart from less prudent peers. He understood that skill alone was not enough, patience, strategy, and foresight were equally critical. It was a lesson in the delicate art of operating on the edge of legality without succumbing to it entirely. The local communities along the fjords watched these movements with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and admiration. To them, Ronnie appeared as a capable young man, confident on the water, quietly assertive in his dealings, and remarkably composed under pressure. Tales of his ventures circulated quietly: the boy who moved goods under the radar, who seemed to anticipate the tides, the patrols, and even the actions of rival operators. These whispers, though modest in scope, marked the beginning of a reputation that would grow far beyond the fjords, blending skill with an almost mythical sense of daring. By the end of this period, Ronnie had transformed from a restless, curious adolescent into a young man whose ambition and ability were matched by discipline and tactical acumen. His first forays into smuggling, though small and calculated, were not mere acts of rebellion, they were carefully orchestrated operations that combined observation, planning, and courage. Each successful venture reinforced lessons in navigation, discretion, strategy, and human behavior, preparing him for the broader, riskier world that awaited. In retrospect, these early experiences on the Nordic coasts were the crucible in which Ronnie's talents were forged. The combination of environmental mastery, technical skill, strategic thinking, and human insight created a rare blend of abilities that would later allow him to rise above rivals, evade authorities, and command respect across multiple countries. The calm, icy fjords, once a playground and a classroom, had become the proving ground for a figure who would come to be known not just for daring smuggling feats, but for a calculated mastery of opportunity, risk, and human psychology. And so, the young Ronnie, gliding silently through misty fjords, carefully maneuvering barrels under moonlit skies, and observing the world with a sharp, calculating mind, began the first real steps toward becoming Ronnie, the Viking. Each voyage, each quiet transaction, each measured risk, and each escape from potential discovery contributed to the foundation of a life that would navigate the shadowy corridors of law and loyalty, ultimately defining a legacy that would ripple across northern seas and into legend. As Ronnie's ventures became more frequent and sophisticated, his reputation began to grow quietly along the fjords. Word spread, first among small networks of fishermen and traders, then to the outer villages, that there was a young man whose skill on the water was unlike any they had seen before. They whispered of the boy who could navigate through fog as though guided by instinct, who could appear at one harbor at night and vanish by dawn, leaving no trace behind. His calm demeanor, coupled with a daring precision, earned him respect and a hint of awe. It was during this time that he began to acquire a name that would stick with him for life, Ronnie, the Viking. The moniker was not merely a reflection of his Nordic heritage, but a tribute to the audacity, strategic brilliance, and almost mythic presence he displayed on the water. The nickname was cemented during one particularly daring venture, one that would later be recounted in hushed tones along the coast. A rival smuggling group had attempted to intercept a shipment of spirits that Ronnie was transporting under cover of night. The fjords were shrouded in thick fog, and every move required meticulous calculation. Ronnie anticipated the rival's path, altered his course with near imperceptible adjustments, and managed to slip past undetected. The rival group, convinced they had him cornered, found only empty waters where his vessel had been moments before. Such feats, executed with calm precision and strategic foresight, amplified the aura surrounding him. To locals, it seemed as though he was part of the sea itself, an untouchable force guided by instinct and cunning. But the Viking nickname was not only about daring escapes. It reflected his growing ability to command respect, inspire loyalty, and navigate both human and environmental challenges with ease. Ronnie began to form more structured alliances with other smugglers, men who recognized his natural leadership and tactical insight. Unlike others who relied solely on intimidation or brute force, he commanded loyalty through competence, discretion, and the subtle art of calculation. Those who worked with him quickly learned that mistakes were rarely tolerated, but guidance and mentorship were freely given to those willing to observe, learn, and adapt. His presence brought order and predictability to operations that were otherwise chaotic, and this, more than any show of force, distinguished him as a leader. Even as his influence expanded, Ronnie remained a figure of contrasts. Outwardly calm, he radiated a sense of quiet confidence. Inwardly, he was intensely analytical, constantly observing, calculating, and adapting. Each night spent gliding through hidden inlets or steering a boat under moonlight was a lesson in human behavior as much as navigation. He watched his associates, gauged rival intentions, and considered the likely responses of law enforcement, refining strategies in real time. His mind was always active, yet his demeanor suggested ease and composure. This blend of outward serenity and inward calculation became a hallmark of his growing legend. The strategic mind that had served him well in small-scale operations now began to contemplate more ambitious endeavors. Ronnie noticed gaps in the existing smuggling routes, areas where patrols were sparse and surveillance limited. He recognized opportunities to expand his operations beyond local networks, reaching into neighboring fjords and, eventually, across national borders. Each new plan was carefully conceived, rehearsed, and executed with precision, ensuring minimal risk while maximizing reward. His ability to envision the broader picture, to anticipate complications, and to coordinate complex movements became increasingly sophisticated, setting him apart from other smugglers who relied solely on luck or brute force. As his reputation grew, so too did the sense of mythology surrounding him. Locals began to speak of Ronnie in almost reverent tones, blending fact with legend. Tales circulated of vessels disappearing into fog and reappearing in unexpected harbors, of contraband moving silently under the noses of authorities, and of a young man whose mastery of the sea seemed almost supernatural. While he was careful not to cultivate these stories intentionally, the quiet pride and astonishment of those who observed his skill helped cement the image of the Viking. The nickname carried weight, not just for his daring and audacity, but for the calm, measured brilliance he brought to every endeavor. This period also marked the beginnings of subtle rivalries. Other smugglers, noticing his rising influence, sought to test his skill and challenge his authority. Some attempted interception, while others spread rumors to undermine his reputation. Yet Ronnie's composure and tactical foresight allowed him to navigate these challenges with grace. He observed each attempt carefully, learning from both success and confrontation, refining methods, and ensuring that each encounter further enhanced his reputation rather than diminished it. The Viking, it seemed, was always one step ahead, not because of luck, but because of meticulous planning, acute observation, and an intuitive grasp of human nature. Beyond the operational and strategic aspects, Ronnie also began to understand the psychological power of a name, a presence, and a reputation. The Viking was more than a nickname, it was a symbol, a subtle deterrent to rivals and a source of inspiration for allies. He recognized that influence extended beyond immediate actions, and that perception often shaped reality. By moving carefully, speaking sparingly, and acting decisively, he cultivated an aura of inevitability, suggesting that his mastery of the seas and of opportunity was both natural and unstoppable. Even those who had never seen him in action began to respect, or fear, the legend before encountering the man himself. Amid these developments, Ronnie's daily life remained intimately tied to the fjords that had shaped him. Each morning brought the smell of salt and pine, the cry of gulls, and the rhythm of tides that dictated both opportunity and risk. He remained attuned to these natural cues, allowing them to guide his decisions with an almost meditative calm. The sea, ever unpredictable yet constant, became both mentor and ally, reinforcing lessons in patience, observation, and adaptability. His growing mastery of these elements reinforced his confidence, yet he remained humble in the face of nature's vastness, a humility that tempered daring with prudence, and audacity with foresight. By the end of this period, Ronnie had transformed into a figure whose skill, composure, and emerging authority earned him both respect and caution from those around him. The Viking was no longer merely a boy navigating local waters, he was a strategist, a leader, and a rising legend, quietly commanding influence across the fjords. Each successful venture, each daring maneuver, and each strategic observation reinforced the mythology surrounding him, laying the foundation for the vast, audacious operations that would soon stretch across borders. In the quiet hush of the fjords, under the glow of moonlight and the whisper of the waves, the Viking was becoming more than a name, he was becoming an enduring force, one whose story would ripple far beyond the shores of his youth. As Ronnie's reputation solidified along the fjords, he began to contemplate ventures that extended beyond the familiar inlets and coves of his youth. The early smuggling operations had taught him not only the mechanics of moving goods discreetly, but also the subtle art of human psychology, how trust, loyalty, and perception could be as powerful as skill and speed. Now, with the growing confidence of experience and the quiet aura of the Viking behind him, he turned his gaze to more ambitious targets, trade routes that spanned the northern seas, harbors in neighboring countries, and shipments that promised greater reward and, naturally, greater risk. The horizon no longer represented merely distance, it represented opportunity, challenge, and the promise of notoriety. The transition from local to regional operations was gradual but deliberate. Ronnie recognized that ambition without preparation could be disastrous. He spent countless hours studying maps, plotting hidden coves, and memorizing the patterns of tides and winds. He sought knowledge wherever it could be found, speaking to seasoned sailors and merchants in quiet conversations at dusk, listening to tales of navigational tricks, smuggling techniques, and the hazards of law enforcement patrols. Each story, each piece of advice, was carefully filed away in his mind, forming a mental blueprint that would guide increasingly complex operations. The Viking was no longer merely reacting to circumstance, he was anticipating it, shaping it, and, when necessary, controlling it. His operations began to take on a new level of sophistication. Whereas previously he had relied on local networks and casual arrangements, he now started to coordinate with multiple parties across different fjords, orchestrating movements that required precise timing and collaboration. Communication had to be discreet and clever, often relying on signals, trusted messengers, or silent rendezvous at predetermined locations. Every venture became a delicate dance of timing, observation, and subtle negotiation. The slightest misstep, a delayed departure, a misread tide, or a careless word, could compromise the entire operation. But Ronnie thrived in this environment of meticulous planning and quiet tension, honing his abilities with a calm that seemed almost unnatural to those around him. It was during this period that Ronnie's understanding of human nature deepened dramatically. He began to discern patterns of behavior not only among his partners but also among competitors and potential threats. Rival smugglers often underestimated him, seeing him as a young upstart with audacity but lacking experience. Ronnie used this perception to his advantage, allowing others to underestimate him while quietly observing their movements, identifying weaknesses, and exploiting opportunities. He learned to manipulate perception, to control information, and to create an aura of inevitability that amplified both fear and respect. Every encounter became a lesson in strategy, subtle influence, and long-term thinking. Alongside these human lessons, the environment continued to shape his expertise. The northern seas were unpredictable, with storms that could appear suddenly, tides that shifted without warning, and hidden shoals that could spell disaster for the unwary. Ronnie learned to read these cues instinctively: the color of the clouds, the rhythm of the waves, the behavior of seabirds, and to adjust his strategies in real time. The sea itself became a teacher of adaptability, patience, and calculated risk. Each voyage reinforced his belief that mastery required both knowledge and intuition, preparation and instinct, discipline and daring. By now, the Viking's operations were drawing attention beyond his immediate surroundings. Coastal authorities noted patterns of contraband movement that could not easily be explained. Rumors of his skill circulated quietly among rival networks, and whispers of a young smuggler who moved silently and decisively began to spread along trade routes. While he remained careful to avoid direct confrontation with the law, he understood that notoriety could be both a shield and a lure. A reputation for competence and audacity would deter rivals and attract loyal collaborators, but it also carried the risk of increased scrutiny. Ronnie navigated this duality with a subtle, almost meditative awareness, calibrating each decision to maximize advantage while minimizing exposure. At the same time, his operations demanded the development of trust and loyalty among those who worked with him. Ronnie was discerning, selecting partners not only for their skill but also for their reliability, discretion, and temperament. He cultivated loyalty through competence, fairness, and the quiet demonstration of leadership. Unlike others who relied on intimidation or fear, he commanded respect by consistently demonstrating skill, foresight, and control. Each successful venture strengthened bonds, reinforced confidence, and established a hierarchy of trust that would become essential as his operations expanded in scope and complexity. In parallel, Ronnie's ambitions now included understanding the broader economy of the region. He observed trade flows, market demands, and the ebb and flow of goods across borders. He recognized that the movement of contraband was not merely about profit, it was about influence, knowledge, and leverage. By controlling certain routes, he could create dependencies, anticipate shortages, and manipulate outcomes. His vision extended beyond individual voyages. He began to see networks, systems, and the interplay between opportunity and authority. This strategic perspective, rare for someone of his age, positioned him as not only a capable navigator but also a shrewd operator, one who could shape events quietly and decisively. Despite the growing scale of his activities, Ronnie maintained a measured, almost meditative composure. Nights spent steering vessels through hidden inlets became moments of reflection as much as action. Moonlight on the water, the gentle lapping of waves against the hull, and the whispering winds provided both focus and calm. In these moments, he could anticipate challenges, calculate risks, and refine strategies with clarity. The combination of environmental awareness, psychological acuity, and strategic foresight made him increasingly formidable, even in the absence of confrontation. His calm, collected demeanor reinforced the legend of the Viking, a man whose mastery of the seas seemed both natural and extraordinary. By the end of this period, Ronnie had transitioned fully from local smuggler to regional strategist. His operations spanned fjords and coastal villages, drawing on observation, planning, human insight, and environmental mastery. The nickname, the Viking, now carried weight beyond mere folklore. It represented skill, audacity, strategy, and leadership. From the quiet isolation of his early years to the carefully orchestrated ventures that now defined his young adulthood, Ronnie had become a figure whose influence stretched across waters and communities, quietly shaping perception, loyalty, and opportunity. And so, with every calculated voyage, every strategic alliance, and every subtle victory, Ronnie, the Viking, continued to carve his path through the northern seas. Each night on the water, under the glow of moonlight and the whisper of waves, reinforced the lessons of patience, foresight, and cunning. The fjords had made him, but the horizon now called him forward, toward opportunities, challenges, and adventures that would expand his influence far beyond the familiar shores of his youth. His legend was growing, and the world, both law-abiding and shadowed, would soon take notice. By the time Ronnie had firmly established himself as a regional smuggling strategist, his life had become a delicate balance between risk and reward, observation and action, secrecy and influence. The fjords had taught him patience, his early ventures had taught him timing and discretion. Now, as a young man, he was learning the complex dynamics of power, loyalty, and reputation. He began to perceive his operations not merely as transport of goods, but as a subtle network of influence, where control over information, perception, and opportunity was as crucial as the cargo he carried. Every shipment was a lesson in human nature, every alliance a test of trust, and every voyage a measure of both skill and intuition. It was during this period that Ronnie began experimenting with more audacious smuggling operations, targeting shipments that stretched farther across the northern seas. These were no longer simple runs between neighboring villages. They involved multiple ports, unfamiliar waters, and the possibility of encountering rival networks or law enforcement patrols. Each operation required intricate planning, careful calculation of tides, weather patterns, and moon phases, precise timing of departures and arrivals, and an almost instinctive ability to read subtle changes in the environment. For Ronnie, the challenge was intoxicating. He approached each venture with calm, deliberate focus, allowing the rhythm of the water, the whisper of the wind, and the light of the moon to guide his decisions. Alongside logistical mastery, he refined his understanding of human behavior. He learned to read body language, gauge reactions, and anticipate deception among both allies and competitors. This skill proved invaluable when dealing with rival smugglers, local authorities, and merchants who operated in the gray areas of legality. Ronnie recognized early that power did not always come from strength, it often came from foresight, subtlety, and the quiet ability to shape events without overt confrontation. His reputation as the Viking grew not because of spectacle, but because of this understated competence. Stories circulated of the young man who could navigate impossible waters, outthink rivals, and move undetected where others failed, creating a mixture of respect and wariness in those who encountered him. As his operations expanded, Ronnie began to cultivate a network of trusted collaborators, each chosen not merely for skill but for loyalty and discretion. He recognized that a single betrayal could compromise months of careful planning, so trust became a currency as valuable as gold. Alliances were nurtured through competence, fairness, and the quiet demonstration of leadership. Unlike other operators who relied on intimidation or fear, Ronnie inspired loyalty through skill, vision, and strategic foresight. His team became an extension of his mind, capable of executing complex operations with precision, and yet bound by mutual respect and the subtle magnetic pull of his reputation. During this period, he also began to test the limits of audacity. Some ventures involved moving high-value shipments under increased risk, or exploiting routes that others deemed impossible. Mistakes were costly, but each success reinforced his confidence and elevated his standing among allies and rivals alike. Ronnie's ability to combine careful planning with the courage to act decisively set him apart. He did not seek danger for its own sake, he sought mastery, control, and the expansion of opportunity. This blend of ambition, skill, and calculated daring became a hallmark of his operations, and it was quietly acknowledged by all who observed him that the Viking's capabilities were extraordinary. The environmental mastery he had developed over years at sea now became an integral part of his tactical advantage. He could sense subtle changes in wind and tide, predict the drift of fog, and anticipate storms before they arrived. He understood how to use the natural landscape to conceal movement, how shadows and moonlight could aid in stealth, and how the rhythm of the water could dictate timing. Every voyage was a rehearsal in strategy, patience, and observation, blending knowledge of the physical world with understanding of human psychology. This dual awareness, of environment and people, enabled him to operate with an almost uncanny effectiveness, navigating challenges that would have confounded less perceptive operators. At the same time, Ronnie began to understand the power of narrative and perception. His nickname, the Viking, had taken on almost mythic proportions, shaping how rivals, allies, and locals perceived him. He realized that reputation could serve as both shield and weapon. Stories of his skill and daring moved faster than he could, creating an aura of inevitability that deterred interference and fostered respect. He did not cultivate this mythology overtly, instead, he allowed it to emerge naturally from the quiet, deliberate excellence of his actions. By the time his reputation reached the outer fjords, few could challenge him without first considering the skill, foresight, and subtle influence that underpinned his every move. This period was also marked by the first hints of long-term strategy. Ronnie began to think beyond individual shipments, considering how control over certain routes could shape regional influence. He observed how rival networks operated, where weaknesses existed, and how gaps in oversight could be exploited. His approach was methodical, he documented patterns, planned contingencies, and tested scenarios in his mind long before executing them. The result was a system in which risk was minimized and opportunity maximized, allowing him to scale operations with increasing confidence. In essence, he was building the foundations of an empire, not through brute force, but through intelligence, foresight, and the disciplined application of skill. Even as he expanded his reach, Ronnie maintained a personal code that blended pragmatism with subtle ethics. He understood that unnecessary confrontation or exposure could jeopardize not only his operations but also the loyalty and safety of those who worked with him. Therefore, he favored discretion over spectacle, planning over impulse, and calm decisiveness over reckless bravado. This approach reinforced his reputation as a figure of quiet power, one whose presence alone conveyed mastery, foresight, and control. Allies trusted him, rivals respected him, and the waters themselves seemed to respond to his careful command. By the end of this period, Ronnie had evolved into a young man whose influence extended far beyond his immediate surroundings. He was no longer merely a skilled navigator or a daring smuggler, he had become a strategist, a leader, and a quiet force shaping networks, perception, and opportunity across the northern seas. The Viking was now a presence whose legend traveled faster than his vessel, inspiring both admiration and caution. Each successful operation, each calculated risk, and each subtle demonstration of skill added layers to a growing mythology that would continue to define him for years to come. And so, beneath the moonlit sky, with waves lapping gently against the hull of his vessel, Ronnie, the Viking, continued to navigate the intricate currents of human ambition, law, and nature. Each night on the water became a lesson in observation, strategy, and calm decisiveness, reinforcing the skills and instincts that would allow him to rise ever higher in the shadowed, dangerous, and extraordinary world he was beginning to command. As Ronnie continued to navigate the northern waters, he began to encounter the first serious challenges that tested not only his skill but also his judgment, patience, and foresight. Up until this point, his operations had been largely under the radar, guided by careful observation and meticulous planning. Yet, as his reputation grew and his ambitions expanded, he inevitably drew attention, from rival smugglers, local authorities, and even curious merchants eager to benefit from the whispered legend of the Viking. It was a turning point. The quiet, calculated boy who had mastered the fjords was now stepping into a world where stakes were higher, and mistakes carried consequences far greater than before. The first challenges were subtle, almost imperceptible. Rival crews began to watch his movements, tracking patterns, and testing vulnerabilities. A shipment might be delayed by unexpected weather, or a hidden cove might be discovered by competitors who had observed his routes over time. These were not overt attacks but careful probes, attempts to discern the limits of his skill and nerve. Ronnie, however, had learned well from years of observation and early ventures. He approached each challenge with calm deliberation, analyzing the situation from multiple angles, anticipating potential outcomes, and planning contingencies. What others perceived as risk, he transformed into a strategic opportunity. One particularly tense episode began on a fog-laden night, with Ronnie guiding a shipment of high-value goods through a series of narrow inlets. Rival smugglers, aware of the value of the cargo, attempted to intercept his vessel, positioning themselves along anticipated routes. Yet Ronnie's intimate knowledge of the waters, combined with his foresight and attention to detail, allowed him to navigate undetected. Subtle adjustments to speed, course, and timing enabled him to slip past, leaving his competitors scrambling and empty-handed. This event, later recounted in hushed tones along the coast, was a testament not only to his skill on the water but also to his growing mastery of strategy, perception, and psychological influence. These encounters forced Ronnie to refine his approach to human dynamics. He understood that brute strength alone could never guarantee success. Influence, reputation, and foresight were equally vital. He began to develop a keen sense of negotiation, subtly manipulating rivals and collaborators alike to maintain advantage without direct confrontation. Timing, discretion, and perception became tools as powerful as navigation, enabling him to control outcomes before they materialized. By the time competitors realized the extent of his skill, it was often too late. They had already been outmaneuvered, quietly and efficiently. At the same time, the challenges of the northern seas themselves demanded constant vigilance. Weather could change without warning, currents could shift unexpectedly, and hidden rocks or shoals threatened disaster for those unprepared. Ronnie's years of experience had taught him to respect nature as both a teacher and an adversary. He could read the faintest signs of a storm, anticipate the drift of fog, and sense subtle changes in wind or tide. The sea became an ally when approached with respect and understanding, a testing ground for patience and foresight. Each encounter with natural hazards reinforced lessons in preparation, observation, and calm decisiveness. During this period, he also encountered moral and ethical dilemmas, subtle tests of judgment that forced him to weigh loyalty, profit, and risk. Collaborators sometimes sought to bend rules further than he was comfortable with, or to exploit situations for personal gain at the expense of the operation. Ronnie learned to navigate these situations with tact and subtle authority. He asserted control through competence and foresight rather than intimidation, reinforcing loyalty while discouraging opportunism. The ability to manage human behavior became as critical as mastery of navigation, ensuring that his operations remained efficient, discreet, and secure. Even as these pressures mounted, Ronnie maintained a quiet, almost meditative composure. Nights on the water became moments of reflection and strategy, when he could anticipate future challenges and refine his approach. Moonlight shimmered across the fjords, waves lapped gently against his vessel, and the rhythmic sound of water against hull provided a calming backdrop for careful calculation. In these moments, he could mentally rehearse contingencies, anticipate rival maneuvers, and weigh the risks of each potential decision. The Viking was no longer merely reacting to events, he was shaping them, moving with deliberate intent and quiet authority. The increasing challenges also tested his endurance and resilience. Long nights at sea, unpredictable weather, and high-stakes maneuvers demanded both physical stamina and mental fortitude. Ronnie had developed these qualities over years of practice, but the intensification of his operations now required continuous adaptation. He learned to manage fatigue, maintain focus under pressure, and conserve energy for critical moments. These lessons in resilience would prove invaluable as his ambitions expanded beyond local networks, allowing him to maintain composure and strategic clarity in increasingly complex situations. Through these experiences, Ronnie's legend grew, not through ostentation, but through quiet demonstration of skill, foresight, and mastery. Locals spoke of him in hushed tones, the young man who could navigate impossible waters, outthink rivals, and remain calm under pressure. The nickname, the Viking, became synonymous with competence, precision, and an almost uncanny ability to predict outcomes. This growing mythology, carefully maintained by discretion and repeated demonstration of skill, became a strategic asset, subtly deterring rivals and inspiring loyalty among collaborators. By the end of this period, Ronnie had faced and overcome the first true tests of his emerging career. Rivalry, environmental hazards, and human unpredictability had pushed him to refine his skills, deepen his understanding of strategy and human behavior, and solidify the reputation that would carry him forward. Each challenge, approached with patience, foresight, and calm decisiveness, strengthened the foundations of his growing empire on the northern seas. The Viking was no longer merely a promising young smuggler, he had become a figure of subtle power, shaping events with intelligence, observation, and quiet authority. And so, as the fjords lay bathed in moonlight, and the waves whispered softly against the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to navigate the delicate balance of risk and reward, human behavior, and natural mastery. Each night brought new lessons, each challenge refined his skill, and each successful maneuver reinforced the legend of the Viking. The world around him was vast and unpredictable, but he had learned to move with quiet certainty, shaping outcomes, commanding respect, and steadily preparing for the even greater ambitions that lay just beyond the horizon. As Ronnie's reputation continued to grow along the fjords and beyond, he began to realize that success was no longer measured solely by the smooth execution of a single smuggling venture. The scale, complexity, and ambition of his operations were increasing, demanding not only flawless skill but also strategic foresight, adaptability, and a keen sense of timing. What had once been local runs and regional coordination now expanded into multi-route operations, sometimes spanning days and requiring precise synchronization between crews, cargo, and environmental conditions. Every decision carried weight, every movement had consequences, and the margin for error narrowed with each new venture. It was during this period that Ronnie began experimenting with more advanced techniques in smuggling, incorporating lessons learned from both natural observation and human psychology. He began employing diversionary tactics, subtle misdirection, and decoys to outmaneuver competitors or law enforcement patrols. A shipment might appear to follow a predictable route while, in reality, it was taking a hidden path known only to him and his most trusted collaborators. He began coordinating movements with remarkable precision, calculating tides, currents, moonlight, and even the behavior of seabirds to anticipate the positions of rival crews. Each operation became a carefully choreographed sequence of action and observation, blending audacity with intelligence. The human element continued to play an equally important role. Ronnie understood that perception was often as critical as reality. He cultivated a presence that inspired respect and subtly deterred rivals, while simultaneously observing associates and competitors with keen scrutiny. Body language, subtle changes in tone, and small inconsistencies in behavior became invaluable clues. He learned to anticipate betrayals before they occurred, to negotiate alliances without overt displays of power, and to create a network of collaborators who were loyal not out of fear, but out of respect for his skill, foresight, and measured leadership. This quiet psychological mastery allowed him to maintain an edge over rivals who relied solely on audacity or intimidation. A particularly defining moment occurred during a late autumn run, when the fjords were cloaked in a dense, almost impenetrable fog. Ronnie's cargo, a mix of spirits, textiles, and small luxury items, was of considerable value, making interception an attractive target for rival crews. Using his intimate knowledge of the waterways, he guided his vessel through hidden channels and shallow inlets that few dared to navigate. The rival crew, confident in their ability to anticipate his path, was left maneuvering blindly, while Ronnie slipped past undetected. It was not just a display of skill but a demonstration of patience, timing, and the quiet application of knowledge gained from years of observing both the natural world and human behavior. Success in that operation solidified his growing legend and taught him once again that calm, calculated action was always more powerful than brute force or impulsive daring. This period also marked the deepening of strategic alliances. Ronnie recognized that large-scale operations required reliable networks, not just solitary skill. He carefully selected collaborators for their competence, discretion, and temperament, creating a hierarchy of trust and responsibility that allowed complex ventures to proceed smoothly. Each trusted associate became an extension of his strategic mind, capable of anticipating challenges, responding to unexpected developments, and executing plans with precision. In cultivating these relationships, Ronnie reinforced loyalty through competence and fairness rather than fear, establishing a culture of respect and mutual reliance that would prove essential in the increasingly competitive and dangerous environment of northern smuggling. Environmental mastery continued to be a critical factor. Ronnie could read the slightest changes in wind direction, water color, or wave movement, using them to anticipate both natural hazards and the positions of other vessels. This ability allowed him to navigate safely while maintaining stealth, often turning what appeared to be a disadvantage into a tactical advantage. Storms, fog, and hidden shoals were no longer merely obstacles, they were tools in the orchestration of each venture, elements he could manipulate with careful planning and foresight. The sea itself, unpredictable and vast, had become both a classroom and an ally, reinforcing lessons in patience, observation, and calm decisiveness. As Ronnie's operations grew more complex, he also began to encounter rivals who were more organized, ambitious, and audacious than any he had faced previously. Some sought direct confrontation, while others attempted subtle subterfuge, spreading misinformation or attempting to intercept shipments covertly. Each challenge demanded careful analysis, strategic adaptation, and a measured response. Ronnie quickly learned that maintaining an edge required both anticipation and flexibility. By observing patterns of behavior, predicting possible moves, and remaining several steps ahead, he could neutralize threats without unnecessary conflict, preserving both resources and reputation. This period also introduced Ronnie to the subtle art of legacy building. He recognized that the stories told about him, the whispered tales of the Viking navigating impossible waters, evading rivals with calm precision, and executing flawless operations, were as important as the operations themselves. Reputation became both a shield and a weapon. Allies were inspired by it, rivals approached with caution, and even distant observers assumed an almost mythical level of capability. Ronnie did not seek to exaggerate these tales, instead, he allowed them to grow naturally, rooted in the quiet demonstration of competence and foresight that defined every venture. The mythology surrounding the Viking became a strategic asset, shaping perception and amplifying influence across the northern seas. By the end of this period, Ronnie had successfully navigated not only the physical challenges of northern waters but also the complex social and strategic landscape of smuggling. He had honed his ability to anticipate rivals, manipulate perception, and coordinate sophisticated operations across multiple routes. His reputation as Ronnie, the Viking, had grown from local admiration to regional recognition, a symbol of skill, foresight, and quiet authority. Each challenge faced and overcome added layers of confidence, competence, and legend, preparing him for the even greater ambitions that lay just beyond the familiar fjords and harbors of his youth. And so, beneath the still moonlight and amidst the gentle whisper of waves against the hull, Ronnie continued to refine his craft, blending audacity with calculation, observation with intuition, and ambition with measured patience. Each night on the water became both a lesson and a rehearsal, each successful maneuver an affirmation of his growing mastery. The Viking was no longer merely a name, it was a presence, a quiet force shaping events across fjords, harbors, and trading networks, and a legend that would ripple outward, far beyond the shores he had once called home. By this stage in his young career, Ronnie had moved beyond merely navigating the fjords or executing isolated smuggling operations. He was beginning to see the larger picture, the intricate network of trade, opportunity, and influence that stretched across the northern seas. His ventures were no longer simply about moving goods, they had become a complex orchestration of strategy, perception, and calculated risk. Each shipment, each route, and each interaction was a piece of a broader design, a subtle demonstration of his growing mastery over both environment and human behavior. The Viking was not just moving through the waters, he was shaping them. It was during this period that Ronnie's ambitions began to outpace the local confines of his earlier operations. He envisioned routes that stretched far beyond the familiar inlets and harbors of his youth, connecting with coastal towns, distant ports, and even international waters. This expansion required meticulous planning, careful observation, and precise timing. Every detail mattered: the alignment of tides, the position of moonlight, the potential interference of rival crews, and the subtle movements of law enforcement. Ronnie approached each venture with the calm deliberation of a strategist, weighing each variable before committing to action. His ability to anticipate challenges and adapt to changing circumstances became a defining characteristic of his operations. Human relationships, too, had grown in complexity. Ronnie had developed a network of trusted collaborators, each carefully chosen for skill, discretion, and reliability. These allies were extensions of his strategic vision, capable of executing complex maneuvers with precision while maintaining the secrecy and efficiency that had become the hallmark of his operations. At the same time, he remained alert to the possibility of betrayal or opportunism. He had learned to read subtle cues in behavior, detect inconsistencies, and anticipate moves before they occurred. This combination of trust and vigilance allowed him to operate on a scale that would have overwhelmed less disciplined or perceptive operators. One memorable venture during this period involved transporting a particularly high-value shipment of luxury goods and spirits across a series of fjords known for their treacherous currents and unpredictable weather. The operation required the coordination of multiple boats, precise timing, and flawless execution. As the vessels moved under the cover of night, dense fog rolled in, reducing visibility to near zero. Competitors lurked in hidden inlets, hoping to intercept the cargo. Yet Ronnie's intimate knowledge of the waterways, combined with careful planning and real-time observation, allowed him to guide his team through unseen channels, avoiding detection and completing the operation without a single misstep. Success in this venture was not merely a demonstration of skill, it reinforced his reputation, strengthened alliances, and expanded his influence across the region. This period also deepened Ronnie's understanding of risk management. He had learned that boldness alone was insufficient, timing, discretion, and adaptability were equally critical. Storms, fog, rival crews, and shifting loyalties were ever-present variables that could derail even the most carefully planned operation. Ronnie's ability to balance these factors, making split-second decisions while maintaining a calm, deliberate approach, set him apart from others. He understood that every venture was an exercise in strategy, requiring a balance between audacity and prudence, opportunity and caution. Reputation and perception continued to play a crucial role in his success. By this time, stories of the Vikings' exploits had spread widely, quietly circulated in local taverns, whispered along docks, and shared among rival networks. His calm demeanor, flawless execution, and uncanny ability to anticipate challenges contributed to a growing legend that preceded him. Competitors approached with caution, allies deferred to his judgment, and even local authorities regarded his operations with a mixture of respect and wariness. Ronnie recognized the power of this reputation, allowing it to enhance his influence without the need for overt display. The Viking had become more than a nickname, it was a symbol of strategic mastery, audacity, and composure. The expansion of operations also required an increasing emphasis on logistics. Ronnie meticulously managed supplies, coordinated schedules, and ensured that his vessels were maintained for peak performance. Each voyage demanded attention to detail, cargo had to be balanced carefully, equipment checked and repaired, and contingencies planned for every conceivable obstacle. The physical labor of these operations was substantial, yet Ronnie approached it with patience and discipline, understanding that precision in the small details often determined the outcome of the larger mission. During this period, he also began to consider long-term strategy in ways that would shape his future operations. He observed patterns in trade, identified gaps in oversight, and noted the movements of rival networks and authorities. These observations allowed him to plan ventures that maximized profit and influence while minimizing risk. Each operation became not only a source of income but also an investment in his growing empire, a step toward greater control over routes, alliances, and the subtle psychology of those around him. He was no longer reacting to circumstances, he was shaping them with intelligence, foresight, and patience. The natural environment remained both a challenge and a teacher. Ronnie's mastery of the seas was tested continuously by shifting tides, sudden storms, and hidden obstacles. Each voyage reinforced the lessons of observation, patience, and adaptability that had been central to his early training. He learned to anticipate patterns, read subtle signs, and make decisions that balanced risk and opportunity. The fjords, once a playground, had become a crucible, shaping him into a strategist capable of navigating complexity with calm precision. By the end of this period, Ronnie had firmly established himself as a regional power, capable of executing complex, high-stakes operations with precision and discretion. He had refined his strategic thinking, strengthened alliances, and built a reputation that extended far beyond the familiar shores of his youth. The Viking was now a figure of influence and authority, a quiet force commanding respect and shaping events across the northern seas. Each night on the water, every successful maneuver, and every calculated risk reinforced the skills and instincts that would carry him into ever greater challenges. And so, beneath the moonlit skies, with the gentle lapping of waves against his vessel, Ronnie continued to navigate the intricate currents of strategy, human behavior, and environmental mastery. Each voyage became both a rehearsal and a lesson, each success a building block for future ventures. The Viking had become more than a name, he was a presence, an enduring force shaping the northern waters and the networks that traversed them, quietly preparing for the even greater ambitions that awaited beyond the horizon. As Ronnie's operations continued to expand, he began to navigate a new realm of complexity, one that extended beyond the waters themselves into the subtleties of human alliances, rivalries, and reputation management. His early successes had taught him that mastery of the sea was only part of the equation. The other, perhaps more delicate, aspect was understanding people, their motivations, fears, ambitions, and loyalties. By now, the Viking was not just a skilled navigator and strategist, he was becoming a subtle architect of networks, capable of orchestrating interactions, alliances, and conflicts with precision and foresight. During this period, one of the most critical challenges he faced was the management of growing rivalries. Competing smuggling crews were becoming aware of his reputation and sought opportunities to test his skill, challenge his operations, or carve out influence in the territories he had begun to dominate. These encounters were rarely violent, instead, they were exercises in subtle strategy, probing for weaknesses, and observing patterns. Ronnie, however, approached each situation with calm deliberation. He analyzed every move, predicted possible outcomes, and crafted responses that often neutralized threats before they had fully materialized. His ability to anticipate and shape the actions of others had become a defining strength, allowing him to maintain dominance without unnecessary confrontation. One particularly tense sequence involved a rival crew attempting to intercept a shipment along a complex network of fjords. The crew, confident in their knowledge of the area and eager to assert control, believed they had successfully anticipated Ronnie's route. Yet, through careful observation, subtle diversion, and precise timing, he was able to outmaneuver them. The shipment reached its destination intact, while the rival crew was left scrambling to understand what had transpired. This episode was more than a tactical victory, it was a demonstration of strategic foresight, environmental mastery, and an understanding of human psychology. It solidified his reputation as someone who could remain calm under pressure while orchestrating complex operations that others deemed impossible. As his influence grew, Ronnie also began to refine the art of leadership. He understood that authority was not enforced through fear alone, but through competence, reliability, and subtle influence. His collaborators and allies were chosen with care, not just for skill but for character, discretion, and temperament. He cultivated loyalty through consistent demonstration of expertise, fair treatment, and quiet guidance. Unlike other operators who relied on intimidation, Ronnie's authority inspired respect and admiration. Those who worked with him were motivated not by fear of consequences, but by trust in his judgment, admiration for his skill, and the desire to be part of an operation guided by mastery and foresight. The natural environment continued to serve as both challenge and teacher. Fjords, currents, and weather patterns became integral elements of each strategic calculation. Ronnie could read subtle signs in the water, anticipate sudden shifts in weather, and predict how natural forces might interact with human behavior. These skills allowed him to exploit opportunities that others overlooked, turning environmental unpredictability into tactical advantage. Each successful maneuver reinforced the lessons of observation, patience, and adaptability, while deepening his confidence in both his abilities and instincts. In parallel with operational and strategic mastery, Ronnie began to recognize the psychological power of narrative. By this point, the nickname, the Viking, had transcended mere legend. It was a symbol of competence, audacity, and strategic brilliance. Stories of his exploits circulated quietly among rival crews, collaborators, and coastal communities, reinforcing his influence even in his absence. Ronnie did not need to create spectacle. The natural course of events, guided by his skill and foresight, generated tales that enhanced his presence. Reputation, he realized, was a strategic tool, capable of shaping behavior, deterring challenges, and attracting loyalty, all without direct confrontation. This period also brought the first tests of moral and ethical judgment within his operations. As the scale of his ventures increased, opportunities arose that could yield profit but at the expense of long-term stability or the trust of collaborators. Ronnie learned to weigh these decisions carefully, balancing ambition with prudence, reward with risk, and short-term gain with long-term influence. Mistakes could be costly, not only financially but in terms of reputation and loyalty. Through careful deliberation and disciplined judgment, he navigated these challenges, ensuring that every choice reinforced his credibility and preserved the cohesion of his network. By now, his operations had become multi-layered, combining the physical mastery of navigation with the strategic orchestration of human networks. He could coordinate multiple vessels, anticipate rival movements, and adapt to environmental variables with remarkable precision. Each operation was a delicate symphony of timing, observation, and execution, with Ronnie acting as both conductor and participant. The success of these ventures relied on his ability to maintain focus, anticipate complications, and respond calmly to unexpected developments, a skill honed over years of disciplined practice and experience. Even in moments of tension, Ronnie maintained a calm, almost meditative demeanor. Nights spent steering vessels under moonlight became opportunities for reflection, strategy, and foresight. The gentle rhythm of waves, the whisper of wind, and the quiet isolation of the fjords created a backdrop for contemplation and precision. In these moments, he could rehearse contingencies, anticipate potential challenges, and plan the next steps of his expanding operations. The combination of environmental mastery, strategic foresight, and psychological insight allowed him to maintain an edge that few could contest. By the end of this period, Ronnie had firmly established himself as a regional strategist, leader, and master of both operations and perception. He had refined his ability to navigate complex human dynamics, anticipate rivals, and execute intricate maneuvers across the northern seas. His legend as Ronnie, the Viking, was now firmly rooted, both in reality and in the stories whispered along coastal villages and smuggling networks. Allies trusted him, rivals respected him, and the natural world itself seemed to bend subtly to his awareness and skill. Each successful venture, each calculated decision, and each demonstration of calm authority reinforced the growing empire he was quietly constructing. And so, beneath the soft glow of moonlight reflecting off the fjords, with waves lapping gently against the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to navigate the delicate interplay of strategy, human behavior, and environmental mastery. Each voyage became a rehearsal in precision, each challenge a lesson in foresight, and each success a building block in the enduring legend of the Viking. His influence stretched beyond what could be seen, shaping events quietly but decisively, preparing him for the even greater ambitions and challenges that awaited beyond the familiar waters he had once called home. By this stage in his journey, Ronnie had become acutely aware that mastery over the fjords and regional routes alone would not suffice for the ambitions he harbored. The northern seas were vast, and the networks of trade and rivalry that crisscrossed them were becoming increasingly sophisticated. He realized that to maintain an edge, he would need to combine his physical skill with a deeper understanding of strategy, human behavior, and long-term planning. Each venture was no longer merely a test of navigation or daring, it had become an exercise in orchestrating multiple variables simultaneously, weaving together timing, perception, and influence. It was during this period that Ronnie began to expand his network more systematically, reaching beyond the familiar faces of his early collaborators to include individuals whose loyalty and expertise could be leveraged for specific purposes. He approached these relationships with the same careful calculation that guided his movements on the water. Each new ally was assessed not just for their skill, but for temperament, reliability, and alignment with his broader vision. Ronnie understood that the cohesion and discretion of his network were as vital as the technical success of any operation. Trust became a currency, as valuable and fragile as the shipments he moved, and every connection he nurtured was an investment in both immediate success and future security. Alongside network expansion, Ronnie refined the tactical aspects of his operations. He introduced layers of misdirection, decoys, and contingency plans to protect high-value shipments and ensure successful delivery even under unpredictable circumstances. The northern waters, once a familiar playground, had become a dynamic chessboard where every wave, current, and shadow could influence outcomes. He used the unpredictability of the environment to his advantage, leveraging fog, moonlight, and hidden channels to conceal movements from rivals and observers alike. Each operation became a demonstration not only of courage but of intelligence, precision, and the subtle art of influence. Human psychology remained at the core of his growing mastery. Ronnie learned to anticipate the motivations of rivals and collaborators alike, understanding that perception often determined action as much as reality did. He became adept at reading subtle cues, a shift in tone, a hesitation in movement, or a glance that betrayed intention. This ability allowed him to anticipate betrayal, manipulate negotiations, and maintain the delicate balance of trust that his operations depended upon. Where others relied solely on boldness or intimidation, Ronnie relied on understanding, foresight, and the quiet power of demonstrated competence. One defining venture during this period involved coordinating a multi-vessel transport of rare goods across treacherous waters known for shifting tides and unpredictable currents. Ronnie meticulously planned each phase, departure times, routes, signals between vessels, and contingency measures in case of interference from rivals or sudden environmental changes. The operation demanded not only technical skill but also seamless coordination among his collaborators, each executing their role with precision and trust. By nightfall, the cargo had reached its destination safely, and the efficiency of the operation became a quiet testament to the Vikings' growing strategic acumen. Successes like these reinforced loyalty, confidence, and the quiet legend that surrounded him. At the same time, Ronnie began to see the importance of reputation management as an active tool in his arsenal. The stories whispered along docks, in taverns, and across rival networks were no longer incidental, they could be shaped, leveraged, and amplified to strategic advantage. He allowed tales of his skill, audacity, and calm decisiveness to spread naturally, creating an aura that discouraged challenges, inspired loyalty, and subtly influenced the behavior of those around him. The Viking was not only a navigator and strategist, he was a presence, an almost mythic figure whose reputation preceded him, shaping opportunities before he even acted. Environmental mastery continued to play a crucial role in his operations. Each voyage reinforced the lessons of observation, patience, and adaptability. Ronnie could sense subtle changes in wind, currents, or water color, and anticipate the behavior of both natural and human elements. Storms and fog were no longer merely hazards, they became tools in the orchestration of complex operations, offering concealment or strategic advantage when understood and leveraged with care. His deepening connection to the natural world allowed him to operate with confidence, turning uncertainty into an asset rather than a threat. During this period, he also encountered moments that tested his judgment and ethical compass. Opportunities arose that could yield immediate profit but risked long-term relationships or the trust of key collaborators. Ronnie learned to weigh such decisions with care, balancing ambition with prudence, reward with risk, and short-term gain with the sustainability of his network. These moments reinforced the importance of discipline, foresight, and maintaining credibility, qualities that would underpin his growing influence and ensure the durability of his operations. By now, Ronnie's operations had reached a level of sophistication that combined environmental mastery, strategic foresight, psychological insight, and logistical precision. He could anticipate the moves of rivals, coordinate complex operations, and respond to unforeseen challenges with calm decisiveness. Each venture became a testament to his growing skill, each successful delivery a reinforcement of both competence and reputation. The Viking was no longer a promising young smuggler, he was a regional strategist, a quiet authority, and a figure whose influence extended across the northern waters. By the end of this period, the combination of skill, insight, and reputation positioned Ronnie for even greater ambitions. He had learned to navigate not only the physical challenges of the seas but also the intricate networks of trust, influence, and strategy that underpinned his operations. Each night, as he steered his vessel beneath the pale glow of moonlight, the gentle rhythm of waves against the hull became both a guide and a reminder of the lessons learned. He had transformed uncertainty into advantage, observation into foresight, and risk into opportunity. And so, with the quiet confidence of a master strategist and the calm focus of a seasoned navigator, Ronnie, the Viking, continued to shape his world. Each voyage reinforced his skill, each alliance strengthened his network, and each successful operation enhanced his reputation. The northern seas, once a simple playground, had become a stage for calculated ambition, subtle influence, and the quiet assertion of mastery. Ronnie's journey was no longer about mere survival or local success, it was about building an enduring presence, a legacy that would ripple far beyond the familiar fjords he had once called home. By this stage, Ronnie had moved beyond the role of a skilled smuggler into that of a strategist who understood the delicate balance between risk, opportunity, and influence. The northern waters, once a familiar playground, now served as a vast arena in which the Viking orchestrated operations with increasing sophistication. His ventures had grown in scale, requiring coordination across multiple vessels, careful timing, and precise communication with his network of trusted collaborators. Each operation became a subtle dance, combining navigation, strategy, and psychology, where every choice could ripple through rival networks and local communities. It was during this period that Ronnie began to realize the importance of long-term planning and foresight in shaping not just individual ventures, but the very structure of the regional smuggling landscape. He observed patterns in rival movements, shipping schedules, and coastal surveillance. He noticed recurring weaknesses in certain routes, gaps in authority, and opportunities where speed, stealth, and timing could yield significant advantages. By studying these patterns, he began to craft operations that were not merely tactical successes, but strategic moves that would enhance his influence, strengthen alliances, and subtly undermine competitors without direct confrontation. Ronnie's ability to anticipate human behavior became a cornerstone of his growing expertise. He could sense hesitation, ambition, or fear in the subtle gestures and expressions of those around him. Collaborators were carefully evaluated, trusted with responsibilities that matched both skill and temperament, while rivals were observed with quiet attention, their actions analyzed for patterns and weaknesses. Where others relied on intimidation or overt displays of force, Ronnie relied on perception, foresight, and the careful orchestration of events. Each decision was measured, deliberate, and guided by a calm awareness of both the immediate and long-term consequences. A defining operation during this period involved a shipment of highly valuable goods that needed to traverse a series of fjords notorious for unpredictable currents and concealed hazards. Ronnie coordinated multiple vessels, each carrying part of the cargo, with signals and timing so precise that the movement appeared seamless to an observer. As fog rolled in, and rival crews lurked in hidden inlets hoping to intercept the cargo, Ronnie's expertise in navigation and understanding of human psychology allowed him to avoid detection entirely. By the time the rival crews realized they had been outmaneuvered, the cargo had already reached its destination. This success was more than a demonstration of technical skill, it was a testament to his ability to orchestrate complex operations with foresight, discretion, and calm decisiveness. During this period, Ronnie also began to understand the strategic value of reputation as a tool in itself. Tales of his exploits, whispered quietly along docks, in taverns, and across rival networks, amplified his influence and subtly shaped the behavior of both allies and competitors. His calm demeanor, precise execution, and ability to anticipate events lent credibility to the stories, and the legend of the Viking grew without the need for exaggeration. Reputation became a strategic asset, allowing him to deter challenges, inspire loyalty, and influence negotiations, often before he even acted. Environmental mastery remained an essential element of his success. He had developed an almost intuitive understanding of the northern waters, able to read subtle shifts in wind, tide, and wave movement, and predict how these factors might influence both navigation and rival behavior. Fog, storms, and treacherous currents were not merely obstacles, they became tools to be leveraged, allowing him to create opportunities where others saw only danger. This integration of natural observation with strategic planning gave him a distinct advantage, allowing him to move with confidence and precision in conditions that would have confounded less skilled operators. At the same time, Ronnie refined his approach to leadership. He recognized that loyalty was cultivated through competence, fairness, and trust, rather than fear or coercion. His collaborators were empowered to take initiative within clearly defined boundaries, ensuring that each operation could be executed efficiently while maintaining secrecy and cohesion. This approach fostered a sense of shared purpose and confidence within his network, creating a culture of respect, discretion, and reliability that strengthened his operations and allowed him to scale them beyond what would have been possible in a more hierarchical or authoritarian model. Ethical and strategic decision-making became increasingly significant. Ronnie encountered situations where the temptation for short-term profit conflicted with long-term stability or the loyalty of his network. He learned to weigh these decisions with care, balancing ambition with prudence and immediate reward with sustainable influence. Mistakes could have ripple effects, jeopardizing relationships, reputation, or operational security. Through disciplined judgment and careful analysis, Ronnie navigated these challenges, ensuring that each choice reinforced both his credibility and the cohesion of his network. By now, Ronnie's operations had become a sophisticated blend of tactical execution, strategic foresight, psychological insight, and environmental mastery. He could coordinate multiple vessels, anticipate rivals, and adapt to unexpected developments with remarkable precision. Each venture reinforced his skill, each success strengthened alliances, and each challenge honed both his intuition and judgment. The Viking was no longer simply a young smuggler gaining regional notoriety, he had become a master of complex systems, a quiet architect shaping networks, influence, and opportunity across the northern seas. As the fjords lay bathed in moonlight, with gentle waves lapping against the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to refine his craft, blending observation, strategy, and calm decisiveness. Each night became both a rehearsal and a lesson, each voyage an opportunity to test foresight, leadership, and skill. The Viking was no longer defined solely by daring or audacity, he was defined by mastery, presence, and the quiet assertion of influence over both people and environment. The legend he was cultivating would ripple far beyond the waters he navigated, establishing him as a figure whose impact would be felt long after each successful journey. And so, with each passing night, Ronnie advanced further into the intricate interplay of strategy, human behavior, and environmental mastery. His network grew more cohesive, his operations more sophisticated, and his legend more enduring. The Viking had become not only a name but a presence, a quiet force shaping the northern seas, guiding outcomes, and preparing for the even greater ambitions and challenges that awaited beyond the familiar fjords he had once called home. By this point in his journey, Ronnie had firmly established himself as a figure whose influence extended far beyond the narrow fjords of his youth. The Viking had grown from a skilled smuggler into a strategist capable of orchestrating complex operations across a network of trusted collaborators, each carefully chosen for skill, discretion, and reliability. Yet with this growth came new layers of complexity, as his reputation expanded, so too did the ambitions of rivals, the scrutiny of local authorities, and the challenges of managing multiple operations simultaneously. Success required not only skill on the water but a delicate orchestration of strategy, perception, and foresight. Ronnie began to expand his operations into territories that had previously been considered difficult or too risky. He sought routes that allowed him to bypass known patrols, avoid predictable patterns, and capitalize on gaps in surveillance. These ventures required precise timing, careful coordination, and the ability to anticipate rival maneuvers. Each successful passage reinforced his confidence, while every misstep, though rare, provided valuable lessons in contingency planning, risk assessment, and the importance of adaptability. The Viking was learning that mastery was not a destination, but a continuous process of observation, reflection, and refinement. One particularly challenging venture during this period involved a shipment that had to traverse an intricate network of fjords during a period of unusually rough weather. Wind and waves threatened to disrupt not only navigation but also coordination between multiple vessels. Ronnie approached the situation with characteristic calm and focus, carefully analyzing the interplay of natural forces and human timing. Signals were subtly exchanged, maneuvers carefully choreographed, and decisions made with deliberation rather than haste. By anticipating the behavior of both the environment and his collaborators, Ronnie ensured the cargo reached its destination safely, reinforcing both trust among his network and the growing legend that followed him across the northern seas. Rival crews, now well aware of Ronnie's capabilities, attempted increasingly sophisticated challenges. Some sought to intercept shipments directly, while others employed subterfuge, spreading misinformation or attempting to sow discord among his collaborators. Ronnie met each challenge with patience, observation, and foresight. He had learned to recognize the subtle signs of intent and hesitation, to anticipate moves before they occurred, and to adapt with calm decisiveness. Rather than reacting impulsively, he allowed rivals' actions to inform his strategy, turning potential threats into opportunities to demonstrate skill and reinforce reputation. Each successful operation, executed with precision, further solidified the Viking's influence and deterred those who might consider challenging him. During this period, Ronnie also deepened his understanding of psychological influence. He recognized that perception could shape behavior as much as reality. The stories of his exploits, carefully observed and quietly shared, became a form of strategic leverage. Rivals approached with caution, allies deferred to his judgment, and even local authorities regarded his operations with a mix of respect and wariness. Ronnie allowed these narratives to develop organically, rooted in actual skill and foresight, creating an aura of competence and calm that amplified his presence without the need for spectacle. Reputation had become a tool, as important as navigation or strategy, shaping opportunities and interactions across the northern waters. Leadership within his network also evolved. Ronnie understood that true authority came from competence, fairness, and trust, rather than intimidation. Collaborators were empowered to act decisively within defined boundaries, ensuring that operations could scale efficiently without sacrificing discretion or cohesion. This culture of mutual respect and reliability strengthened both the execution of complex ventures and the loyalty of his associates. By combining strategic oversight with trust and delegation, Ronnie created a network capable of navigating challenges that would have overwhelmed less organized crews. Environmental mastery continued to serve as both a guide and a strategic advantage. Ronnie could anticipate subtle shifts in wind, water, and tide, using this knowledge to navigate treacherous channels, avoid detection, and exploit opportunities invisible to less attentive observers. Storms, fog, and unpredictable currents were not merely obstacles, they were elements to be understood, anticipated, and leveraged to the advantage of the operation. Each voyage deepened his understanding of the interplay between human action and natural forces, reinforcing lessons in patience, observation, and adaptability. As operations grew more ambitious, Ronnie also faced ethical and strategic dilemmas. Decisions regarding cargo, routes, and alliances required careful consideration, balancing short-term gain against long-term stability, and ambition against prudence. He learned to weigh the consequences of every choice, understanding that missteps could jeopardize not only immediate success but also reputation, trust, and the cohesion of his network. Through careful deliberation, he navigated these complexities, ensuring that each decision strengthened his credibility, reinforced alliances, and minimized unnecessary risk. By now, Ronnie's presence extended beyond mere operational success. He had become a quiet authority, a figure whose skill, foresight, and reputation influenced both allies and rivals. The Vikings' legend was no longer just local, it had begun to ripple across the northern waters, reaching coastal towns, trading networks, and rival crews alike. This growing influence allowed Ronnie to shape events indirectly, leveraging reputation, strategy, and subtle psychological insight to maintain advantage without constant direct action. Mastery, he realized, included not only physical skill and tactical planning, but the art of perception and influence. As the moonlight shimmered across calm fjords, Ronnie reflected on the delicate balance of his growing operations. Each venture had become a lesson, each challenge an opportunity to refine skill and judgment. The interplay of strategy, human behavior, and environmental awareness had transformed him from a promising smuggler into a regional strategist, quietly shaping networks, influencing perception, and orchestrating complex operations with precision. The Viking had evolved into more than a name, he was a presence, a force of calm authority and careful mastery that extended across the waters he navigated. And so, beneath the pale glow of moonlight, with waves lapping softly against the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to refine his craft. Each night brought new lessons, each successful maneuver reinforced confidence, and each interaction with allies and rivals deepened understanding. The northern seas had become both a classroom and a stage, allowing the Viking to demonstrate skill, exercise influence, and quietly prepare for the greater ambitions and challenges that lay beyond the familiar fjords he had once called home. By this stage, Ronnie had become acutely aware that the northern seas were no longer just a venue for skillful navigation and daring smuggling. They had become a complex theater in which strategy, perception, and human behavior intertwined, creating opportunities and challenges that extended far beyond the physical dangers of currents, storms, and fog. Each operation required meticulous planning, careful coordination, and the quiet orchestration of multiple variables. Ronnie had learned that success relied not only on audacity but on foresight, patience, and the subtle art of influence. It was during this period that Ronnie began to experiment with multi-layered operations, ones that combined diversion, timing, and environmental mastery to an unprecedented degree. A single shipment might involve multiple vessels moving along different routes, each carrying part of the cargo, with signals and timing carefully calibrated to prevent interception. Fog, moonlight, and hidden inlets became tactical tools, allowing him to outmaneuver rivals who relied on predictable patterns and overt displays of force. Each successful operation reinforced both confidence and reputation, while failures, though rare, provided valuable lessons in adaptability, observation, and contingency planning. The human element of his operations grew increasingly sophisticated. Ronnie was no longer simply coordinating crews, he was shaping networks, anticipating motivations, and influencing behavior through subtle signals, trust, and demonstrated competence. Collaborators were carefully selected not just for skill but for temperament, reliability, and discretion. Rival crews were observed, analyzed, and anticipated, with their moves often countered before they fully manifested. This combination of environmental mastery and psychological insight allowed Ronnie to maintain a consistent advantage, executing complex maneuvers while conserving resources and minimizing risk. One particularly ambitious operation during this period involved the transportation of high-value goods through a labyrinth of fjords known for unpredictable currents and concealed hazards. Ronnie coordinated multiple vessels, each following carefully timed routes designed to confuse potential observers and rival crews. As fog descended and the night deepened, he navigated through hidden channels, relying on his intimate knowledge of the waterways, precise timing, and subtle communication signals. The operation proceeded flawlessly, the cargo reaching its destination intact, and the rivals left bewildered, unable to comprehend the precision and foresight that had guided every move. This success was emblematic of Ronnie's growth, demonstrating not only skill but strategic mastery, calm decisiveness, and the quiet influence of reputation. Reputation had become an essential strategic tool. The Vikings' exploits were now whispered along docks, taverns, and rival networks alike, creating an aura of competence, audacity, and foresight that extended beyond his immediate actions. Ronnie allowed these stories to develop naturally, rooted in actual skill rather than exaggeration, letting perception amplify his influence. Allies were inspired, rivals approached with caution, and even local authorities regarded his operations with a mixture of respect and wariness. Reputation, he realized, could shape behavior as effectively as action itself, a subtle yet powerful force that reinforced advantage without the need for constant intervention. Environmental mastery remained central to every operation. Ronnie had honed the ability to read subtle shifts in wind, tide, and wave patterns, using this knowledge to navigate treacherous channels, avoid detection, and exploit opportunities invisible to others. Storms, fog, and unpredictable currents were no longer merely hazards, they became tools, elements that could be leveraged to create advantage or facilitate escape. Each voyage deepened his understanding of the interplay between human action and natural forces, reinforcing lessons in patience, observation, and adaptability. The sea had become both mentor and collaborator, offering guidance and challenge in equal measure. Leadership within his network also evolved. Ronnie understood that authority derived from competence, fairness, and trust, not fear. Collaborators were empowered to make decisions within clearly defined parameters, allowing operations to scale without sacrificing secrecy or cohesion. This approach fostered loyalty and initiative, creating a culture of respect and reliability that strengthened both execution and cohesion. The Vikings' quiet authority inspired confidence, with each operation reinforcing trust and collaboration, allowing him to coordinate increasingly complex ventures with precision and calm. Strategic foresight became a defining feature of his operations. Ronnie began to anticipate rival behavior, identify opportunities, and craft contingency plans that allowed him to respond to unexpected developments without panic or disruption. He recognized that patience was as valuable as audacity, and that timing often determined success more than boldness alone. Each decision, from route selection to the allocation of responsibilities among collaborators, was informed by careful observation, prior experience, and foresight, creating a framework in which success was not left to chance but carefully orchestrated through planning and subtle influence. Ethical and practical judgment became increasingly significant. Opportunities that promised immediate gain sometimes threatened long-term relationships or the cohesion of his network. Ronnie learned to balance ambition with prudence, reward with risk, and short-term success with sustainable influence. Missteps could jeopardize trust, reputation, or operational security. By navigating these decisions carefully, he maintained credibility and strengthened the foundations of his growing network. Every choice, from the mundane to the high stakes, was a building block in a broader architecture of influence, skill, and legacy. By now, Ronnie's operations had become a seamless integration of tactical execution, strategic foresight, psychological insight, environmental mastery, and leadership. He could coordinate multiple vessels, anticipate rivals, adapt to unforeseen challenges, and maintain cohesion among collaborators with calm authority. Each venture reinforced his skill, each success expanded his network, and each challenge honed both intuition and judgment. The Viking had evolved beyond a mere smuggler, he had become a master strategist, quietly shaping events, networks, and perception across the northern seas. Even in moments of tension, Ronnie maintained a serene focus. Nights spent steering vessels under the soft glow of moonlight became opportunities for reflection, rehearsal, and strategy. The gentle rhythm of waves, the whisper of wind, and the isolation of the fjords provided the perfect environment for contemplation and precision. Each voyage offered lessons, each decision a refinement of skill, and each success a reinforcement of his quiet authority. The Vikings' presence had grown from legend to reality, manifesting not only in action but in perception, influence, and reputation. By the end of this period, Ronnie had firmly established himself as a regional force, a figure whose skill, foresight, and reputation extended across fjords, harbors, and trading networks alike. Allies trusted him, rivals respected him, and even nature itself seemed to align with his understanding, responding to his observation and subtle guidance. Each successful operation, each carefully weighed decision, and each demonstration of calm authority built upon the last, creating a foundation for even greater ambitions and more complex ventures in the years to come. And so, beneath the serene glow of the northern moon, with waves gently lapping against the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to navigate the intricate interplay of strategy, human behavior, and environmental mastery. Each voyage became a rehearsal in foresight and skill, each challenge an opportunity for refinement, and each success a quiet affirmation of his growing legend. The Viking had transcended the role of smuggler, he had become a master of systems, influence, and perception, quietly preparing for the even greater ambitions and challenges that lay beyond the familiar waters he had once called home. By this stage of his journey, Ronnie's reputation had begun to transcend the boundaries of the fjords and coastal towns where he first honed his craft. The Viking had become a figure of quiet authority, a strategist whose skill, foresight, and composure influenced both allies and rivals alike. His operations were no longer confined to simple smuggling runs, they had evolved into carefully orchestrated campaigns, blending navigation, psychology, timing, and perception into a seamless whole. Every venture, every decision, and every movement was a deliberate act, a calculated step in a broader strategy that extended far beyond immediate gain. It was during this period that Ronnie began to recognize the importance of adaptability in maintaining dominance. The northern waters were unpredictable, and rival crews were becoming increasingly sophisticated in their attempts to challenge him. Weather, currents, and tides remained as formidable as ever, but now these natural forces were coupled with human ingenuity and cunning. Ronnie's ability to anticipate change, adjust plans, and execute with calm precision became a defining element of his growing mastery. Each challenge was an opportunity to refine strategy, test alliances, and strengthen both skill and reputation. The complexity of his operations had grown significantly. Multiple vessels often traveled in tandem, each following a carefully timed route designed to create diversion, protect valuable cargo, and minimize risk. Signals and subtle cues allowed for coordination without drawing attention, a delicate choreography that demanded trust, discipline, and foresight. Ronnie's knowledge of both natural and human systems allowed him to anticipate contingencies and adapt instantly when unexpected obstacles arose. The success of these ventures relied not merely on daring, but on observation, patience, and the quiet exercise of authority over both people and environment. Human dynamics remained central to his strategy. Ronnie had developed an acute ability to read motivations, detect hesitation, and anticipate intentions. Collaborators were carefully chosen for reliability, skill, and discretion, and their loyalty was nurtured through competence, trust, and shared purpose. Rival crews, aware of his reputation, often approached with caution, yet their movements could still be anticipated and countered through subtle strategy rather than confrontation. In this way, Ronnie maintained control, leveraging both his skill and perception to shape outcomes without unnecessary risk. One particularly challenging operation during this period involved a high-value shipment that needed to traverse a series of fjords notorious for treacherous currents and unpredictable fog. Ronnie coordinated multiple vessels, each part of a carefully timed plan designed to mislead rivals and ensure the safe delivery of cargo. The night was dense with fog and rival crews attempted to intercept the shipment, confident in their knowledge of the waters. Yet through precise timing, intimate knowledge of hidden channels, and subtle signals, Ronnie guided the operation to success. The cargo arrived intact, allies' trust was reinforced, and rival crews were left both wary and bewildered. This venture epitomized the Vikings' blend of skill, strategy, and psychological mastery. Reputation had now become a strategic asset. Tales of the Vikings' exploits circulated quietly but persistently along docks, in taverns, and among rival networks. Stories of his calm decisiveness, precise execution, and uncanny foresight enhanced his influence, shaping behavior before action was even required. Allies deferred to his judgment, competitors approached with caution, and local authorities viewed his operations with a mixture of respect and careful observation. Ronnie understood that perception could be as powerful as action, and he leveraged his growing legend to reinforce his advantage and protect his interests across the northern waters. Leadership continued to evolve under his watchful eye. Ronnie recognized that authority was earned through competence, fairness, and trust rather than coercion. Collaborators were empowered to act within defined boundaries, ensuring operational efficiency while preserving cohesion and discretion. This approach cultivated loyalty, initiative, and resilience within his network, allowing him to scale increasingly complex operations without overextension. The Vikings' calm authority inspired confidence and respect, reinforcing both control and collaboration in a system that relied as much on subtle influence as it did on direct action. Strategic foresight became a central principle guiding every decision. Ronnie began to anticipate rival behavior, identify latent opportunities, and develop contingency plans for unexpected events. Timing became as critical as boldness, and patience emerged as an asset. Choices were made not only for immediate benefit but with long-term stability in mind, balancing ambition, risk, and influence. The Vikings' ability to see beyond the immediate horizon allowed him to maintain advantage, adapt to changing circumstances, and execute operations with remarkable precision and discretion. Environmental mastery remained intertwined with strategic thinking. Ronnie's understanding of currents, tides, wind patterns, and hidden channels gave him an edge that rivals could not match. Storms, fog, and unpredictable water behavior were not mere hazards. They were integrated into the orchestration of his plans, offering opportunities for concealment, diversion, or tactical advantage. Each voyage reinforced lessons in observation, adaptability, and the integration of natural forces into broader strategy, transforming unpredictability into a tool rather than a threat. Ethical and strategic judgment also grew increasingly important. Decisions often involved weighing short-term gains against long-term relationships, loyalty, and operational security. Ronnie had learned that credibility and trust were fragile, and missteps could ripple through his network with significant consequences. Through careful deliberation and measured action, he navigated these choices, preserving both the cohesion of his network and the durability of his influence. Each successful operation became a building block in an architecture of skill, foresight, and reputation, ensuring that every venture reinforced both stability and growth. By the end of this period, Ronnie had fully evolved into a master strategist and influential figure across the northern waters. His operations combined environmental mastery, psychological insight, tactical execution, and strategic foresight in a seamless whole. Each success reinforced trust among collaborators, deterred rivals, and enhanced his quiet but formidable presence. The Viking was no longer defined solely by daring exploits. He had become a figure of calm authority, capable of shaping outcomes and influencing events with subtlety and precision. As the northern moon cast its glow across calm fjords, Ronnie reflected on the lessons of years spent navigating both water and human networks. Each challenge had honed skill, each venture reinforced judgment, and each decision strengthened the cohesion and loyalty of his network. The Vikings' presence had grown from legend to reality, a combination of mastery, foresight, and subtle influence that extended beyond the waters he navigated. Each night on the sea was a rehearsal and a lesson, a chance to refine skill, anticipate outcomes, and assert quiet authority over both human and environmental forces. And so, beneath the soft luminescence of moonlight, with the rhythmic lapping of waves as his constant companion, Ronnie continued to navigate the intricate interplay of strategy, perception, and environmental mastery. Each voyage reinforced skill, trust, and foresight, each operation enhanced reputation and influence. The Viking had evolved beyond the title of smuggler into a master of systems, networks, and perception, preparing for even greater ambitions and challenges that lay beyond the fjords he had once called home. As Ronnie's influence continued to spread across the northern waters, he began to understand the delicate art of balancing ambition with caution. The Viking had evolved far beyond a skilled smuggler or daring navigator. He was now a strategist whose every decision carried weight, both in the present and for the future of his growing network. Rivals had become increasingly aware of his skill and foresight, and while few dared to confront him directly, subtle challenges and attempts at subversion were becoming more frequent. Each day demanded calm observation, patience, and a keen understanding of human behavior. During this period, Ronnie started to envision operations on a scale previously unimagined. He was no longer content with small cargo runs or local dominance. Instead, he sought to orchestrate movements that involved multiple shipments, varying routes, and careful coordination with trusted collaborators. Timing became critical, signals had to be precise, actions synchronized, and contingencies anticipated. Every vessel, every crew member, and every environmental factor had to be accounted for. Success now depended not only on courage or skill but on meticulous planning, strategic insight, and the ability to maintain composure under the subtle pressure of high stakes. Rival crews were testing him in new ways. Some sought to intercept shipments, others attempted deception by spreading misinformation or attempting to fracture alliances within his network. Ronnie, however, had honed an ability to anticipate these moves. He observed not only actions but the intent behind them, reading hesitation, ambition, and subtle cues that revealed hidden strategies. Where others might have relied on brute force or intimidation, Ronnie used foresight, perception, and careful orchestration. By anticipating challenges before they fully manifested, he consistently turned potential threats into opportunities, reinforcing both trust and reputation among his collaborators. One particularly complex operation during this period required the coordination of 3 separate vessels, each carrying part of a valuable cargo, through a labyrinth of fjords known for their treacherous currents and hidden obstacles. Fog had begun to settle over the waters, creating both danger and opportunity. Using a combination of subtle signals, precise timing, and intimate knowledge of the terrain, Ronnie guided the operation with calm precision. The cargo reached its destination intact, allies' confidence in his leadership was strengthened, and rival crews were left bewildered, unable to comprehend the sophistication and foresight behind every move. This operation exemplified the Vikings' mastery of strategy, perception, and environmental awareness. The human element of leadership had also grown in importance. Ronnie had learned that loyalty and trust were as essential as skill and audacity. Collaborators were chosen not only for competence but for temperament, reliability, and discretion. Each was empowered to act within clearly defined boundaries, ensuring operations ran smoothly while maintaining secrecy and cohesion. This approach fostered initiative, responsibility, and resilience within his network. Authority was not imposed through fear but earned through competence, fairness, and consistent demonstration of skill, reinforcing loyalty and cohesion among those who followed him. Reputation had now become a powerful tool, extending influence far beyond immediate operations. Tales of the Vikings' exploits were quietly shared in coastal towns, trading networks, and among rival crews. His calm decisiveness, precise execution, and ability to anticipate events enhanced his legend, shaping behavior without direct action. Allies deferred to his judgment, rivals approached with caution, and even authorities regarded his operations with a mixture of respect and wariness. Ronnie had mastered the art of perception as strategy, recognizing that stories and reputation could reinforce advantage as effectively as any physical maneuver. Environmental mastery remained central to his approach. Ronnie's ability to read subtle changes in wind, tides, and currents allowed him to navigate treacherous passages, avoid detection, and exploit opportunities invisible to others. Storms and fog, once purely hazards, became elements he could integrate into strategic plans, offering concealment or tactical advantage. Each journey reinforced the interconnection between human action and natural forces, deepening his understanding and sharpening his skill. Adaptability, observation, and patience had become as vital to success as navigation or cunning. Ethical and strategic judgment was increasingly critical. Opportunities for immediate profit sometimes conflicted with long-term trust, stability, or loyalty within his network. Missteps could have ripple effects, jeopardizing relationships, reputation, and operational security. Ronnie learned to balance ambition with prudence, short-term gain with long-term stability, and risk with reward. Each decision reinforced the framework of his operations, ensuring that every success strengthened trust, cohesion, and strategic advantage. Mistakes were rare, but each provided lessons that further refined his judgment and reinforced his authority. By now, Ronnie's operations had evolved into a sophisticated integration of tactical execution, strategic foresight, psychological insight, environmental mastery, and leadership. Multiple vessels, collaborators, and contingencies could be managed seamlessly, with calm authority guiding each operation. Every success enhanced reputation, deterred rivals, and reinforced cohesion. Each challenge provided an opportunity to refine skill, judgment, and intuition. The Viking was no longer simply a figure of daring exploits, he had become a strategist whose influence extended far beyond his immediate surroundings, shaping networks, perception, and outcomes with subtle mastery. Even amidst the tension of high-stakes operations, Ronnie maintained a serene focus. Nights navigating under moonlight, with the gentle lapping of waves against his vessel, became moments for reflection, rehearsal, and strategic assessment. Each voyage was an opportunity to anticipate potential obstacles, refine timing, and strengthen the cohesion of his network. The rhythm of the sea became a guide, its quiet constancy reinforcing patience, observation, and foresight. The Viking's presence had grown from legend to reality, a combination of skill, perception, and influence that shaped the northern waters with quiet authority. As this period drew on, Ronnie began to contemplate even greater ambitions. His operations, reputation, and network had reached a level of sophistication that allowed him to consider ventures spanning wider regions, more complex coordination, and higher stakes. The lessons of the fjords, patience, observation, foresight, and trust, had prepared him for challenges far beyond the familiar waters of his early years. Each success had built upon the last, creating a foundation of skill, influence, and legend that positioned him to expand further while maintaining control and discretion. And so, beneath the calm luminescence of the northern moon, with waves gently caressing the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to navigate the interplay of strategy, human behavior, and environmental mastery. Each voyage reinforced skill, trust, and foresight, each operation strengthened networks, reputation, and influence. The Viking had become more than a smuggler, he was a master of systems, perception, and strategy, quietly preparing for the even greater ambitions and complex ventures that lay beyond the fjords he had once called home. By now, Ronnie had firmly established himself as a master of the northern waters, his operations blending skill, strategy, and perception into a seamless orchestration that few could match. Yet with this success came new challenges, both subtle and formidable. The Viking understood that growth and influence brought attention, curiosity, and occasionally envy. Rivals and opportunists were alert, each hoping for a misstep or vulnerability. Ronnie had learned that mastery required not just courage or audacity, but calm foresight, patience, and the ability to anticipate human behavior alongside environmental forces. During this period, Ronnie began to refine the intricate art of deception and misdirection in his operations. Not all challenges could be met directly, and sometimes the greatest advantage lay in subtlety. He learned to manipulate perception, planting signals that guided rivals toward false conclusions, while the true path of his cargo remained hidden. Timing, coordination, and observation became crucial tools. Each vessel, route, and collaborator was part of a carefully constructed system, designed to maintain secrecy, ensure success, and reinforce trust within his network. Misdirection was no longer a tactic, it had become an art form, executed with quiet precision and foresight. Environmental mastery remained central to every operation. Ronnie had honed his ability to read currents, wind patterns, and subtle shifts in tides, allowing him to anticipate both opportunity and danger. Fog, storms, and hidden channels were no longer simply hazards, they had become tools he could integrate into strategic plans. By blending natural observation with human psychology, he could anticipate the movements of rivals, optimize routes, and safeguard cargo. Each voyage reinforced lessons in adaptability, patience, and the subtle interplay between nature and strategy. The sea had become both mentor and partner, offering guidance and challenge alike. Human dynamics were equally important. Ronnie had developed a keen ability to read motivations, detect hesitation, and anticipate intentions. Collaborators were carefully chosen for skill, discretion, and temperament, and were empowered to act decisively within established parameters. Loyalty was cultivated through trust, fairness, and competence rather than fear or intimidation. Rival crews, aware of his growing reputation, approached with caution, but even they could be anticipated through careful observation and psychological insight. Ronnie's quiet authority shaped behavior across networks, allowing him to maintain advantage without overt confrontation. One particularly challenging operation during this period involved a shipment of rare and valuable goods that had to navigate a labyrinthine network of fjords, known for hidden obstacles and unpredictable currents. The cargo was split among multiple vessels, each following carefully coordinated routes designed to mislead potential observers. Signals, timing, and contingencies were orchestrated with meticulous precision. As fog enveloped the waters, rival crews attempted to intercept the shipment, yet Ronnie's careful planning and intimate knowledge of the fjords ensured the cargo reached its destination unscathed. The success of this operation reinforced trust within his network, deterred rivals, and further solidified his reputation as the Viking, a figure whose skill and foresight seemed almost preternatural. Reputation had become one of Ronnie's most powerful tools. Tales of his calm decisiveness, precise execution, and strategic foresight circulated quietly but persistently, shaping perception across docks, taverns, and rival networks. Allies deferred to his judgment, rivals approached cautiously, and even authorities observed his operations with respect and circumspection. The Viking had learned that perception could be as potent as action, and he leveraged his growing legend to reinforce advantage, maintain discretion, and subtly guide behavior. Reputation, strategy, and perception now worked in harmony, enhancing both influence and operational success. Leadership within his network had matured further. Authority was not imposed but earned through competence, fairness, and reliability. Collaborators were empowered to act decisively within clearly defined boundaries, ensuring operations ran smoothly while maintaining cohesion and secrecy. This approach fostered trust, initiative, and resilience, allowing complex operations to be executed efficiently. Ronnie's calm authority inspired confidence, creating a culture in which each individual understood both their responsibility and their role in the broader system. The cohesion and discipline of his network became a force multiplier, amplifying his effectiveness across every venture. Strategic foresight guided every decision. Ronnie anticipated rival behavior, identified hidden opportunities, and developed contingencies for unexpected events. Patience became as valuable as boldness, and timing often determined outcomes more than daring alone. Decisions were made with both immediate and long-term considerations in mind, balancing ambition, risk, and sustainability. Each success reinforced confidence, each failure, though rare, offered lessons in adaptation and foresight. Through deliberate planning and subtle influence, the Viking maintained control over a complex, dynamic network that spanned fjords, towns, and trading routes. Ethical judgment played a crucial role as well. Opportunities for immediate gain sometimes conflicted with long-term trust, relationships, and operational stability. Ronnie had learned to weigh every choice carefully, ensuring that ambition did not compromise credibility or cohesion. Missteps could ripple through the network, threatening alliances, reputation, or security. Through careful deliberation, he navigated these dilemmas, preserving loyalty and maintaining operational effectiveness. Each successful venture became a building block, reinforcing the foundation of skill, foresight, and reputation upon which all subsequent actions depended. By the end of this period, Ronnie had transformed into a figure whose mastery encompassed far more than navigation or daring alone. His operations represented a seamless integration of environmental awareness, psychological insight, tactical execution, leadership, and strategic foresight. Multiple vessels, crews, and contingencies were managed with calm precision, each operation reinforcing trust, deterring rivals, and enhancing his quiet but formidable presence. The Viking had transcended the identity of smuggler. He was now a master of networks, systems, and perception, influencing outcomes without unnecessary exposure or risk. Even amidst high stakes and potential peril, Ronnie maintained serenity and focus. Nights spent steering vessels beneath the soft glow of moonlight became moments for reflection, rehearsal, and assessment. Each journey was an opportunity to anticipate obstacles, refine timing, and strengthen the cohesion of his network. The rhythm of waves, the whisper of wind, and the isolation of the fjords reinforced patience, observation, and foresight. The Vikings' presence had evolved from whispered legend into tangible authority, shaping the northern waters with skill, perception, and quiet mastery. Looking ahead, Ronnie recognized that the skills and networks he had cultivated offered a platform for even greater ambitions. His operations, reputation, and strategic insight provided the foundation to expand influence, coordinate increasingly complex ventures, and navigate challenges beyond the familiar fjords he had once called home. Each success, each carefully planned operation, and each display of calm authority had built a lasting structure of skill, trust, and influence. The Viking had become more than a name, he was a presence, quietly shaping the northern seas and preparing for ambitions yet to be realized. And so, beneath the pale, silvery glow of the northern moon, with waves gently caressing the hull of his vessel, Ronnie continued to refine his craft. Each voyage strengthened skill, trust, and foresight, each operation reinforced reputation, cohesion, and strategic advantage. The Viking had evolved into a master of systems, perception, and strategy, quietly preparing for the even greater challenges, ambitions, and legends that awaited beyond the familiar waters of his youth. By now, Ronnie had become a commanding presence across the northern waters. His reputation as the Viking preceded him, earning both respect and caution from allies, rivals, and even authorities. No longer was he simply a smuggler, he was a strategist who orchestrated complex operations with multiple vessels, precise timing, and careful coordination. Every decision reflected foresight, patience, and understanding of both human behavior and the unpredictable sea. His network of collaborators was meticulously cultivated. Each individual was chosen for skill, reliability, and discretion. Empowered to act within defined boundaries, and guided by the principles of trust and loyalty. Rival crews, aware of his reputation, often hesitated, while Ronnie's subtle influence ensured outcomes were rarely left to chance. Environmental mastery played a critical role. Storms, fog, and hidden channels became tools, allowing him to navigate hazards and anticipate rival movements with calm precision. Success had become a balance between daring and restraint. Foresight and careful planning allowed him to neutralize threats before they fully manifested. Reputation amplified influence, shaping behavior even without direct action. Ronnie's legacy was being built not only on achievements but on the quiet authority, strategic insight, and trust he instilled in his network. Each operation reinforced cohesion, strengthened reputation, and cemented his enduring presence across the northern seas. As his career reached its culmination, Ronnie reflected on a life defined by strategy, skill, and subtle authority. The Viking had mastered not just the northern waters but the human networks, perceptions, and systems that ensured his influence endured. Every operation, every decision, and every relationship had been a thread woven into a lasting legacy of calm mastery and foresight. Reputation had become as valuable as any cargo. Allies trusted his judgment implicitly, rivals approached with caution, and even authorities recognized the quiet authority he commanded. Leadership, Ronnie realized, was less about spectacle and more about earned trust, competence, and the subtle shaping of outcomes. The lessons of patience, observation, and strategy had guided him through decades of challenge and opportunity. His legacy would endure in the people he had trained, the networks he had built, and the stories whispered in fjords, taverns, and trading ports. The Viking's life was a study in the quiet power of foresight, discretion, and influence, demonstrating that mastery is measured not by daring alone, but by the subtle orchestration of events, perception, and trust. Ronnie, the Viking, would remain a legend, not for recklessness, but for the enduring calm, skill, and wisdom that defined his journey across the northern seas.